on Friday, October 6th at 8:30 a.m. Roll call, please.
Kelly Owens.
Here.
Dick Carlton.
Here.
Jeffrey Bergeron.
Here.
Jay Beckerman.
Present.
Todd Rankin.
Here.
Mayor Eric Van Miller.
Yes. Approval of the agenda, Rick, any additions? Anything you want to take off? Maybe this BGV thing? All right, agenda stands as presented and we move on to our only item of the day, and that is the BGV Peak 8 Gold Rush Lot Development discussion. Mark and Chris. Thank you. Good morning.
So we'll be tag teaming this today. The way we're going to do this is we're going to take the council through each of four main issues related to parcel 4. And that is the admin site right now. Chris is going to maybe pull it up there just so everyone can see. We're talking about the existing administration building for the ski area. And that was the site of the former East Peak 8 Hotel. And so that's what the discussion is going to be focused on today. So we're going to take this in piece by piece. Staff is going to give a short presentation on each of 4 items, and then followed by Mike is going to take you through a little bit of his thought process on those, and then we'll be looking for council input. So the 4 issues are going to be programming and overall density for the project, size, everything like that. Then we'll be looking at Cucumber Gulch protection. Then we'll be looking at Ski Hill road traffic. And finally, we'll be taking a look at outdoor energy use as it relates to the recently adopted REMPT ordinance that the council adopted a few months ago. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to start our first discussion point.
All right. Well, good morning, council. Chris Kulik, planning manager for the record. And just a little preface before I dig into the density and programming section of parcel 4. This process between really staff and the applicant has really been, there's been a lot of like back and forth, and we're really trying to get as much information to you in a timely manner. So there was one memo that BGV included. It had a couple additional request. Christy Matthews Lydell really went through with a fine-tooth comb after we prepared her memo and brought up a couple other things that they may ask. I'll try and address those on the floor. We apologize for not having the time to have every item that they included in the memo here for discussion, but I'll try and frame it in the context of some of the other discussion. But that's, we're just trying to get through as many items as possible at these meetings and be as productive as possible. So with that, I'll lead into just discussing the overall density and programming of parcel 4. And really, it is substantially the same as what was previously approved with the East Peak 8 Hotel. It's a nominal decrease of about 3.1% square footage. What they have proposed now is at just over 286,000 square feet, with all residential, commercial, guest services, common areas, and that is excluding the underground parking. Previously, it was approved at just over 295,000. We do know that how many more SFEs would be required now as compared to when it was previously approved. In 2020, the number of SFEs, because we did have the exemption for common areas and amenity space, where it was only counted as mass and not density. Now with our recent code changes to eliminate policy 4 mass, everything is counted as density, whether it be above ground or below ground. So that brings it from just over 145,000 SFEs as previously approved up to just shy of 220 SFEs for approximately, kind of the same space. The applicants did provide an updated unit count where the number of units are the same, but they now are proposing that all of the condominium units are fractional ownership. So there's a total of 78 condominium units proposed with 147 units at kind of maximum number of keys due to lock off units. And then the remaining amount of residential in the proposed building is 36 hotel rooms. This compares to the previous East PK hotel application that had 49 whole ownership units that was expanded to 77 units when factoring in for lock-offs, and then 137 hotel rooms. Looking at the commercial space,
Chris, before you go on, so the 20 whole ownerships that are in our package are now 78, or they'd now add to the 58, just for clarification.
those just go to the fractionals, what they're proposing. And I think Mike will probably take you through that a little bit more when he
One more
presents.
on Eric's question. So the keys didn't change. So the keys are still 147?
The keys are still, yeah, and I think it's the way that that they had originally in the table. Basically, there was a, misinterpretation on our part. So we're trying to,
Yeah, because I
clear that.
saw a bunch of whole ownership on some of the blueprint plans.
I think, but,
Yeah.
might want to
There-
turn and talk to
yeah,
your son.
we
I think
just
there's
had
difference.
there was a key on one sheet of the plans that said whole ownership condos, and I think that we didn't erase it, and that's where it ended up in
Okay.
here. Is in one spot, and so we've eliminated that throughout the plans, so there's no
78 and 36 are the two numbers we're looking
Yes.
at today. Okay. All right.
0 and 36, 0 whole ownership.
Okay.
147 keys.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
yeah, absolutely. Commercial space, they have a little bit more than was previously approved, approximately 3,000 square feet more. With a 4,300 square foot restaurant, and the remaining commercial space isn't broken out. We do note that per the current master plan and previous density transfer agreement, the site had a total of 11 SFEs of commercial allowed. So that'd be yet another minor master plan change to allocate a little bit more density for commercial. Guest services, which are defined in the master plan, is really like, they have guest services and there's also ski area support, and there's a slight difference, but guest services is really like, commercial space that has to do with the operation of the ski area, whether it be, straight office space for the ski area or ski patrol locker rooms. Ski rental is included, as well as, lockers and ski storage. So they have a total of 6,600 square feet of guest service space proposed, with just over 5,000 being utilized by Vail Resorts, with the remaining 1,500 square feet to be occupied by the BOEC, which is consistent with what was previously approved. There's a nominal increase of space for the BOEC with this application. The interior amenity space is slightly increased from the previous application up to 22,000 square feet. So an increase of 2,500 square feet over the previous, and none of that space is proposed to be used as an amenity club. It'll be only used by guests of the property. Parking is proposed at 279 spaces. This is 54 spaces than the previously approved 330 spaces. And this is one of the comments from one of Christie's comments to our memo, is with our recent density changes, we did carve out a density exemption for most parking garages that are above grade, as long as there's a portion that, if it's unconditioned space and has like a 12-inch gap somewhere along the facade. In this case, where it'd be all underground, it actually doesn't have that exemption. It's something I think we didn't intend to capture with the density amendment. I think we always had the intention of exempting parking, particularly underground parking, where it's screened from counting. So that would be another ask, that they would have to be exempted for this to have the proposed SFEs line up. So that's something that I apologize for kind of throwing on the floor for the discussion.
Can you go over that one more time?
So in our density definition, read the exact one that we exempted when we had the discussion about exempting parking garages from counting as density. It says building areas that are not fully enclosed and feature portions of open or mesh wall that exceeds 12 inches vertically are entirely permeable across at least one facade, such as a trash dumpster enclosure, parking garages, porches, or similar areas shall not be counted as density. This design, because it's fully underground, as opposed to the parking
Right.
structure will be on parking 2, would be counted as density under this definition. It was a good catch by Christie. And so that's another question would be to exempt this area from counting as density as designed.
And what's that total density calculation?
I think it's like around 100 and I have to look at the,
There's 135,000.
Yeah, 100
garage.
The fee count for,
the SFE count would be, I guess it would be prorated over all the different ones where we'd have kind of
Okay.
between, which we could probably figure out at some point today. Previously, the underground space was 164,000, so it's smaller, but just kind of pointing out, a large parking structure on parcel 2 would not count as density under this, which is above ground and actually looks like a big structure. This would count because it is fully enclosed, or unless they redesigned it, they have some kind of exposure of 12 inches or greater.
The fees, were those counted in the East Peak 8 development when we went through that?
The parking, no, we've never counted parking structure. And that's why we wrote this. We thought we were writing it to kind of carry forward what we've always done. I mean, we've always encouraged parking to be screened and underground when possible. So all the large buildings up there, nothing ever counted as density or mass.
all right, thanks.
So if we want to talk about building program, it's probably a good chance to break, answer questions, or have Mike talk about his specific programming.
Let's get questions first from council, but and then Mike can go. Anything to ask the staff?
On the density,
Just what he's talked about right now. So density and programming from a staff, and then Mike will give his.
yeah. What is, Chris, what is, support, I forget what it's called, anyway, let me get to that graph.
Guest services?
No,
Oh, somewhere in the plan where it says support within the building?
yeah,
Was that on the next page? Yeah.
So support is yet like another subsection of guest services. I think it's specifically locker rooms, restrooms, where it has an exemption from density under the current master plan. But they're kind of like, I think, deemed another layer that's even more essential than just the guest services. For guest services, if you're charging for lockers, you're charging for ski rental, and then your office space for your employees, that's deemed a little bit more elective. But if you have a ski area, I think it's expected you'd provide restrooms and other things that are completely essential. So there was a carve out for certain items that wouldn't be counted as density.
report, could you send us the definitions out of the code for all of those, for amenity, guest services and support?
Sure.
Just so-
Yeah, and we probably should have like I think at the previous meeting, we did have the master plan in there, which has it, and we neglected to include it this time.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, the definitions and then exactly kind of what they're thinking
Mhm.
with
Yeah,
it.
we absolutely can do that.
How about common circulation? The 58,000 for that, what does that include?
That counts as density now. So that's a big chunk of really that, and amenity is the big gap between that previously approved number of SFEs and the
Okay,
219 it's proposed today.
so those two numbers count.
Those two numbers count.
Um. And then, and I don't know if we'll get to this later, but just the breakdown of parking is now the time to ask about that.
I think we'll talk about, well, I guess we could either talk about it now or we could talk about it in the context of Ski Hill Road traffic. So I guess I'm open to talk about it either point.
We need to talk about it now.
Okay. Yeah, because my question's kind of in relation to the size of the building. The 70 or 75 that you referred to, that sounded like some kind of agreement with the previous site.
Yeah, my understanding, and Mike maybe can fill in, but that's my understanding. There's an agreement with the ski resort to provide 75 parking spots.
In
On that,
addition,
Today, the ski resort parks 120 vehicles in front of the admin building. In our deal with them, they call out 75 spaces to stay subterranean on that site. And so they're reducing their vehicle count by 45, but we still have to accommodate the 75 that's per the count of parking. And we're working to see if there can be any further reductions to that.
So it's 279 plus 75?
No, no, inclusive of the 75.
Okay.
But
So-
that's in addition to what the code requires.
Correct.
Okay. Because that's concerning to me as we talk about redevelopment and set that precedent where we're gonna, we're gonna give a variance to our code based on a agreement that the developer had with previous owner. And we're gonna give a variance to our code to satisfy that. To me, that's not necessarily relevant. I would much prefer to see these. I'm assuming these are like ski patrol and stuff like that, the
Yeah.
guys that have lockers, because
I mean,
I would much-
it's their essential, operating
Yeah.
personnel.
I'd much,
to clarify, they actually do not need a variance to basically allow these spots, because for both indoor and outdoor recreation, there is no official minimum or maximum per the code. It says to be decided by the director and like whatever's appropriate by the director and the planning commission vis-a-vis the town council. So they actually would not require a waiver from our maximum parking standard. It's just basically if you agree that those are acceptable or not.
I probably would not. I think it's a dangerous precedent to set. I think that parking could be satisfied up in the stables lot, which is closer to the patrollers locker room anyway. I mean, I love the idea of parking patrollers up there. That's super important. They're very, very important to our community. But I think we could ideally make the building a little bit smaller by eliminating that right now stables lots being used for paid parking, which I don't think was ever intended. for up
Well,
there.
in the peak 7 and
So-
peak 8 master plan, it calls out 200 winter recreational parking spaces, and the stables lot, satisfies that condition. So it's the combination of surface lots at peak 7, the turn station for the gondola at 7, as well as what's in the stables lot to solve to the 200 that's called out by the town. for
The
up there.
parking in front of one skill place is technically not for one skill place. It's supposed to be to satisfy the common parking for both skier and commercial up there.
Yeah, well, we're already amending that master plan, so we could amend it again if we need to. I mean, I'm thinking traffic on Ski Hill Road. I mean, this is additional traffic on Ski Hill Road, and this is an opportunity to reduce that traffic and utilize these 70 cars going up and down Ski Hill Road to use parking that's already been built and is creating some of that congestion. So secondly, it sets a precedent that I think is very dangerous with redevelopment. So those are my comments, or
Okay, good-
questions and comments.
good comments. All right.
Just quick, Chris, on the different sections of the square footage, fractional units, hotel, amenity, commercial guest services, they're all at a different ratio for SFEs, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Do you have that? I feel like you gave me that table or gave us that table at some point. Do you have that available to share of, what that multiplier is?
Yeah, well, a condominium in most residential development is 1,200 square feet. Commercial is 1,000 square feet. Which is really what we're talking about for the majority of everything it's proposed here. Like if they have townhomes, it would be townhomes or duplexes, it'd be 1,600, but that's not applicable to this site.
Hotels 1,380.
So that's your
Oh, 30.
different, there's,
And then what is in the ones that are exempt from the SFEs are the parking, support, guest services?
Guest services has its own specific pool of density under the master plan. And so I think there was approximately like 7.5 SFEs remaining that they could use for guest services from the previous one, but then that subset for support is exempt from density. So in the previous approval, I think about 7,700 or 7,500 was approved guest services, but then there was another, say 2,800 square feet that qualified as support. So it was like 10.5 of what they had previously for between those two. And they,
So for these calculations, though, as far as we're considered for this application, the ones that are exempt are guest services, support, and parking.
the support would be, and then parking, if you choose to kind of go with the historical interpretation that shouldn't be included as density.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think we're trying to like, and you've gotten a fairly specific breakdown. We're really, all this is obviously very important in terms of calculating everything to the SFE, but I think when we're getting down to like the support, we're trying to get a kind of a macro level perspective of that's probably the area where we're most comfortable. There's to be a certain pot of density they have to pull from, and there's certain things that the ski area needs and that building and the commitment to the BOEC. But yeah, we could obviously even drill down to the exact square footage, but there'll probably be a little bit of tweak between now and when they went to site specific, assuming that this would go forward.
Chris, on the previous development agreement, did we award any positive points for BOEC?
No, that was a commitment to the for a community benefit within.
Okay.
and that'll be similar to the snow access.
Yeah.
I assume. All right, other questions for staff? Mike?
Okay. The PowerPoint. Sorry. I put something together in normal fashion, but I'll go through it quickly because out of respect for your time. There it is. Okay. And skip some of this background stuff that Chris covered and that you guys probably know well. And so let's see. Okay, parcel 4 focus. I was struck by the fact I drove from Denver on Sunday at 1 o'clock. And when I got home, I wanted to Google map what it'd take to get back from Breckenridge to Denver. My point here is it's not if they're coming, it's how many are going to come. They're on their way here and they're going home. And I think that the global strategy here is to remember that what we're trying to do here is take 2 large multifamily sites, one at the North Gondola and one at the base of Peak 8, and consolidate that into one large building, which is at the base of Peak 8. I agree with Chris that it's nominally smaller than what was previously approved. But I would note, and Chris points this out clearly when he talks about the SFEs, that when the SFE count goes from 146 at the base of the mountain on the East Peak 8 site up to 220 to fulfill, if you do that math, 220 minus the 146, and I don't want to do a lot of air math today, but that's 74 SFEs. And that's what you're looking at more or less in the reduction of overall build in this community, is that because of the code change and the necessity to move density up the hill to affect a similar sized building, that translates into less build in our community, which I think was the goal with the code change. And as we aggregate all this density, the way we look at it, like Chris is saying, is that we're combining the 146 SFEs that are at the base of the mountain with 143 at the gondola, 288 in total, and then redeploying those. Well, a big chunk, over 25% of what we have as a bank, is now being used to satisfy a code change. So it affects the idea of a down zone. But this is the end result of that code. And this is the end result of aggregating the density and consolidating on one site. And so we end up with one building, not two, and workforce housing and some single family homes. And so when I say it's not if they're coming, but how many, this is what this does ultimately is result in less tourist beds. At the end of the day, that's, I think, what, in addition to vacating the visual disruption at the North Gondola lot, this strategy results in fewer heads in Breckenridge, fewer places for people to sleep. The more places there are for people to sleep, they're going to come and fill those beds up. And so this is a way for us to organically limit some of the number of guests that come to our community. So our goals throughout is to reduce our community-wide building footprint, reduce the total key counts for tourists, continue to be an excellent steward of the Gulch. I think we've proven that out already at Peak 7 and Peak 8, and then operate and build in an environmentally conscious fashion. So you guys already know we're at parcel 4. I'll go through, you don't need to see this stuff. Again, this was for Jeffrey. He's not here, but I wanted to make the math simple, that 1 is less than 2, if you wanted to do his elevator speech at the end of the day. But there's the basic algebra. So smaller, smaller, smaller. So like I said, and I agree with Chris, nominally smaller than the original approval. What I think is also a valid apples to apples comparison is to evaluate with the current code what could have been built on the 2 sites. In other words, to take the 146 SFEs that exist today on the East Peak 8 site and say, what could you build with that density on that site under today's rules? And then add that to where we were in the planning process with the North Gondola. We were 3 meetings through site specific. Take that for however you want to. But what I wanted to do is present the idea in terms of the basic algebra. I was just showing that when you compare what we propose to build in the form of a big building against the 2 sites, it's significantly smaller. So this is what is in your packet, the 421,000 square feet that we would build at the base of Peak 8. We went through and did some calcs. This is from our submittal that is suspended on the North Gondola, just the North Gondola site, 308,000 total square feet. And then we went in, and Chris didn't have an opportunity to audit the math, but I think that this is fairly representative of that 35% down zone of what would happen on that site, that there could have been 281,000 square feet built up at the base of the mountain. And so when I add those 2 things together, we end up with 589,000 square feet. So comparing them, our building 421,000 against the 2 sites aggregated results in a nearly 30% reduction in community-wide building footprint. And so, yes, I agree that it's nominally smaller than what was previously approved. No dispute that. But I do think it's at least a reasonable intellectual exercise to say, what if the other 2 happened? And I feel like, to me, as a math kind of nerd, that makes sense to take a look at that. So 168 less thousand square feet and 28% smaller. Less community-wide vehicles, like Chris said, 279 indoor parking spaces, inclusive of 75 for the ski resort. I would say that they've been a great partner in working on this. They've already reduced their count by 45 to get to 75 essential workers up there. And I know that I know that Jody was, and I'm not sure who's going to continue working on, auditing that number in a more careful fashion. So I think that what we're looking at with the 75 for the ski area is the worst case scenario. And they are working judiciously to see if that can be less. The previous building had 333 parking spaces. So nominally smaller building, but a 16% smaller number of parking spaces. Compared again to this hypothetical of what could have happened at Peak 8 and North Gondola, we calc that scenario at 360 total spaces. So 81 fewer cars in the community, a 23% reduction in cars. And then on to Keys, we're at 203 with the townhomes at 20 keys for 10 units. 204 was the previous, 214, sorry, I need my glasses on there. So just nominally smaller parking counts. But again, compared against the what could have been built scenario, if you added together the East Peak 8 at 146 under today's rules with the North Gondola, it's 318 spaces. And so when I compare those, it's 115 fewer parking spaces in our community and a 36% reduction. Keys, I'm sorry, Keys. Thank you, Mark. That's it. That's the way we wanted to do this, was to go through this and then I stop and then hard pause.
Okay, questions on that information? Really? Good job, teacher. What's next?
Questions are good.
All right, well, we'll move on to Cucumber Gulch, which obviously,
We want to talk about height.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, we are, I like his cue there threw me off. No, we have a couple more site planning issues. Thanks, Mark. Building height, there isn't a height exhibit included in both the memo and in their submittal. And it is exactly the same height as what was previously proposed at 73 feet, 8 inches. Which is, I guess, most importantly below the east cross gable of One Ski Hill Place, which was required per the most recent master plan amendment. And then we point out that this would receive -10 points. We're not supportive of waiving those -10 points at a future site specific meeting. Height for all of the buildings that have been constructed there has always been assessed negative points because the master plan references the recommended height under the lugs and therefore defaults to negative points for any excess over the recommended height. So in this case, it's between 1/2 story but is less than 1 full story below the recommended building height. So therefore there's a, we put it in the memo here, a very straightforward calculation. It would earn -10 points. It's, I guess, not disputed under the code.
We agree with that. And it eliminates the relative nature of the building height discussion from future consideration. Building height's a measurement, but using the east cross gable of One Ski Hill Place puts a glass ceiling on the total height. And that, if you will, creates more of an absolute policy with respect to height versus a relative policy that is calced based on, taking minus points or where you start measuring the building on the ski hill. I think if you were like, by way of weird example, if we push the building several hundred yards up the hill, it could be 2 stories, but looked at visually as the tallest building in Breckenridge. So that's why the glass ceiling is important, because it establishes a reference point that is not relative.
Okay, questions on height?
I guess I was just to point out one other thing really quickly. The area of the building that they really, it's hard to see because it's really from looking at extrapolating the floor plan since there's not any facades. Previously, the building had a little larger footprint, but stepped down towards the edge to the 4 o'clock subdivision, which is one of the items that was talked about, I think, fairly extensively with the neighbors. This one does essentially go up the full height at the same spot, but doesn't have that wing. So it's really, I guess it's a judgment call on the part of the council if they prefer, the building that they continue to step down or maybe even have a little larger footprint like the previous building, or if you're okay with it going, straight up to the kind of the tallest part along that eastern facade. And there's also a module that's kind of eliminated. It's in the northeast corner, which would be adjacent to Ski Hill Road too. It also steps down to that. So I know it's really hard to explain without actually having a facade, but we noticed it in the plans, and the master plan does reference that towards the ends of the Peak 8 base that it should be lesser in height as compared to the center. So that was one of the things that we talked about a lot, was transitioning down to the adjacent neighborhood there in the previous one.
But Chris, isn't there a pretty significant tree buffer of fairly tall trees? And then, there's not like a house or a building that we're stepping down to. It's just stepping down.
Yeah, it's transitioning the neighborhood, but you're correct. There's a substantial tree buffer now, and actually probably more vegetation to be retained by having a smaller footprint. So there's obviously trade-offs, but we probably would have to modify that language to say if it's just going to full height under the amendment, if you felt that the smaller footprint was more important than the transition of the building down to the property line.
We would follow your direction on that. We're not married to that. We'll follow your direction. What we are married to is that we pulled this building back 20 feet from One Ski Hill Place, which was for us with respect to buffer. That's where the rubber meets the road. That it was important. It was important to the One Ski Hill Place Owners Association before, and we got to a place where they accepted it where it was in order to get this approved. And look, in trying to be a reasonably good neighbor, we've electively pulled it back some. And so, we're hopeful that effort to improve upon the previous approval is recognized as we go to site specific, which is why there's a little ask in here with respect to how buffer would be viewed at site specific. That we've done something that is that we would like to get credit for at some point in the process, rather than just a thank you.
So to boil it down, you are suggesting smaller footprint, but no stepping down on the eastern facade.
If that's what the direction you give us, if you say step it down, then we'll do that.
But that's the give and take right
Yes. Yes.
there. Okay.
And that there's consideration for the pullback on the western side of our building, the eastern side of One Ski Hill Place, so that there's a greater buffer between the two buildings.
We acknowledge the increased separation on the western side, and also in particular how we talk about how the layout for the delivery zone is no longer accessed through One Ski Hill Place and is now entirely on their parcel with a greater separation.
Okay, questions on this?
Have we heard from the neighbors on this one?
We have not.
We might reach out to some that had, there were some that were on the east side that were involved last time. Maybe reach out and see what they think.
Yeah, previously the owner was directly adjacent where it'd have probably the most impact one way or the other. Bill Anderson was in fairly regular communication throughout the.
That was not a good plan because it had delivery trucks rolling in front of underneath his condo as an easement access to delivery. And so part of what we have is a second curb cut on Ski Hill Road to allow the delivery trucks to access the property direct. So it's vacating that access point for service as well as pulling the building back that we're proposing here, that we're committed to.
Mr. Anderson was actually the neighbor most close in the 4 o'clock subdivision.
Okay, so there's 2 questions here we'd like to answer. Does council have any concerns with conceptual building height? And then this question about stepping the eastern facade. Thoughts?
To understand a little more, it sounds like in the previous version, which I know is expired, but it's helpful for reference that the step down was important to the neighbors there, but we do need to balance that with the added buffer with Ski One Hill Place. So I think to Dick's suggestion of getting input from the immediate neighbors would be helpful.
I agree with Carol. And then on the building height, I guess I'm unclear of where we start measuring from. I know that that's kind of an imperfect science if I understand correctly from.
Well, originally it was probably imperfect science, but per the master plan, there's a very explicit prescription, and it's based on what's called historic grade. And since the current site, if you're familiar with admin, has the steep slope from the road, then it is completely benched where there's a flat parking lot, and then it's steep again. And if you look to the east side where that is dug out from, there's really the historic grade is fairly obvious. So at some point under the master plan amendment, there's a provision under there's a provision under the code that does allow for areas that have been highly disturbed to be measured off a historic grade. So there was an agreement from both sides, from the council as well as at the ski area at the time, to establish a historic grade. So there is a historic grade exhibit that was prepared by Matt Stace's office in conjunction with a surveying company that basically tries to reform what the grade would have been coming down the road. And so the height from the ridges of the building is measured down to the point on that historic grade profile. This is one that is, for people that are maybe haven't gone through the process, sounds very convoluted, but this is one that has been, Eric can vouch for this. This has been talked about extensively, and it's been the agreement of this is where we measure from to this point. And we are not suggesting in any ways, I agree, I believe Mike is not, we do not want to suggest opening this back up, but we want to measure how we've historically done it for all the buildings.
And that's exactly the reason why this USGS measurement off the east gable matters, because if you think about the bench that Chris is talking about, that used to be dirt there on its way down to Ski Hill Road. And so you're picking a point to start to measure the height of the building that's in the air right now.
Yeah.
And then so you could build a technically smaller height building, but it would look visually taller compared to one Ski Hill Place because the starting point of the measurement, which is why we want to work off the east gable and not fiddle with any of this stuff, to know that everyone in this room can know that both in actuality of measurement and in visual interpretation, that this building is smaller than its neighbor.
And that would be absolute height, not like average ridgeline
Correct.
height.
Yeah, to Mike's point, there's a control point of the east cross gable that cannot be exceeded. And it's, as it's designed now, it's like 4 inches lower than that at its highest point. But under the relative policies of the master plan, Mike is correct. If that building were to be pushed up the hill, then it could be viewed as substantially taller. But by having the control measure of the east cross gable, you could not do that. You could push it up the hill, but you couldn't make that tallest ridge line farther up. So basically they go above the recommended 5 stories. That's where you incur negative points, but only up to the point of not exceeding that east cross gable. So it's really a 2-part measurement or 2-part review, and there's both an absolute and a relative aspect.
Thanks, Chris.
So thoughts on the 2 questions then? Conceptual building height and eastern facade.
Yes, on the building height, and then I think let's do some due diligence on the step down on the eastern facade.
Dick?
I agree with Jake.
So there's in our packet, there's a graphic by Roland. It's on page 265 in our packet, but I don't know. And it looks like there's a natural step down, like a portion of the building is up at 88 feet and then there's a step down to 53 feet. Is that a current graphic?
If it's from Roland Broughton, that would be from the previous.
That's the old one.
That's
Yeah.
old.
Yeah, that's old.
So we're
And
not.
is that in the last page? Because I think there's a exhibit for the previous traffic study. So yeah,
Ah.
that lower kind of wing off to the east is the part that's basically cut off now, and you just go to the full height.
Okay, so 88 feet is sort of what the building would be in the realm of 88 feet directly to the 4 o'clock.
I think it would be less because I mean the tallest point is 73.8, and that's I think more to the west where it's probably the low spot. But I mean you could say that this to be the same ridge height kind of across there. There's several gables that are all that same USGS height.
Mhm.
So it just depends on what line it's touching, but I would say like, yeah, roughly like, low 70s it would be.
I'm sorry, we'll include, we've got some new drawings too, but we'll include that. It sounds like we're gonna do some more diligence on this anyway, so we'll come back with some more clarity on what this will look like to help everybody, I think, make a good decision.
Yeah, I think it'll probably clear things up because of the topography of the site and the way it's benched. It seems like between the benching and the upslope and then the trees, that it's probably not, the step down is probably not as big of an issue as maybe it's we're considering. So I think just some of that information would help.
Yeah, there's actually a kind of a cool exhibit by the previous architect, and I'll probably share with Bill, that showed the building in 3 dimensions, and then there was this layer put on where it basically said, here's the recommended height limit. You could see the penetration above that. And then there was another line that came from the east cross gable to show that it was subordinate to that, but then there was this little gap of where it exceeded the recommended.
I feel like we've seen the west side. We just haven't seen this east side. And I'm fine with -10 for building height.
Todd, can you hear me? Hey,
Yeah,
Ray.
I'm good on the height. Yeah, I gotcha. I'm good on the height, and then I think we give the BGV crew the latitude on that east facade to just make it look good. So yeah, happy to see what they put together.
Okay, I'm also good on the height. Mike, what I'd like to see for the next iteration is just a 3D sketch of the difference on. So we're working with 2 things here. We're working with a buffer. I'd like to see the original building and then your current building laid over it, because I feel like, you could easily just build your building now and then just add another piece to make your step down, which is not the goal. So that what I'd like to see is original and then proposed on just a 3D, it doesn't have to be, it can just be a box.
We will build a massing model that will show
Okay.
old and proposed.
Yeah, that'll be important for this discussion, because you know what, I am always in favor of stepping down with the natural grade that's to the east and the tree buffer. This may be a much better situation for the neighbors to have it pulled back, even though it's,
Yeah,
more of a tall, hard line. So if we,
We'll show you that.
if we
and-
can do
and
that.
Make sure, even the drawings that we have today, I don't think will give you the perspective
Yeah.
from the side of the building that you want.
Okay.
So we'll have to move that camera computer around to the other side and generate the images.
excellent. Okay, next.
All right, well, continuing on the site layout, we obviously noted that the footprint has shrunk, and, particularly along the one ski hill place or adjacent to one ski hill place, I think there's some significant improvements that would probably appease the neighbors. Previously, there was an access easement that came through. Actually, you can page 14 of the PDF. You'll see that. And then the loading dock was right as close to the property line as you could put a loading dock previously. Now that with the revised design, there's a second access on the property, and it is 82 feet off of the property line. So, a significant more separated. And that was probably one of the more contentious issues at the final hearing from the one Ski Hill Place residents last time. Yeah, right there. You can see that's the,
Well, you could see it.
Loading.
that's the previous design where it has the kind of big swing there coming right in front of one Ski Hill Place. And then you can see the brown, for the truck coming in. And then I think we can't click to the page, but in the revised design, it comes in more a quarter. Yeah,
That actually showing the snow melt, I think there, Chris.
yeah,
It's-
we're talking about the previous access.
I know, I get it, but it's showing that the previous access also had this heated concrete for access there. So that's gone as well.
Yeah. Should I get this right? Yeah, I'll try and scroll it. Sorry, I have the page numbers written down, but
Little center.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Let's type page 12 in. Or that works fine as well. Now you can see the revised driveway deeper into the site from the north that we're supportive of. Previously, engineering was understood that there's a lot of vehicles coming and going from this building and was supportive of having a second curb cut because to have that clear separation between guests and deliveries. So we continue to support that, but it would need a waiver or support for a waiver from our engineering standards to have a second curb cut to the site.
Curb cuts, okay.
We also know that the access, once the building is constructed from Sawmill Road, which would be directly to the east, which is the dirt road how you arrive to the admin site now, would be permanently cut off, which would be a major reduction in car trips through that neighborhood.
So will that end up being like a hammerhead or a
Yes,
turnaround for snowplow
yes,
for them?
yes.
We can go to page 3. We'll talk about Cucumber Gulch impacts, which obviously the gulch is always a huge part of anything that when we're looking at any development.
So hold on, before you go to Cucumber Gulch, does anybody have a problem with the waiver for a second curb cut access point? No. Okay,
Eric, did we go down the line on just the density, the size? of
no,
the building?
because that wasn't a
Wasn't that
question
a question?
that he had asked. I'm just hitting his blue, his blue questions, so.
That's fine.
Maybe we can go back before we jump into the gulch. I think,
Yeah, it probably makes sense to get your feedback on that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we had the question above the table. It says, is the council comfortable with the proposed density and programming?
Yeah.
So it's up there. Wow, I couldn't even see it because it's sort of a carryover from the, okay, so there you go. Is the council comfortable with proposed density and programming? You want to start, Dick?
Sure, I think generally I am, I think that I'm troubled with the 75 parking places. I think, yeah, they may relate to the support. However, when we, I think, modified the master plan to allow support to be free density, we didn't allow parking in addition to that to be free density. It wasn't, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe parking was mentioned at all in relation to support. So I'm fine with the support being free density. I'm not fine with the parking. I really think it's better suited in what is currently being used as paid parking up in the Stables lot. So, and I do think that would slightly reduce the building, which it'll also come up with Ski Hill Road. I think, it's important to do everything we can to help that situation. I also think it's a little bit dangerous constantly comparing this building to the last building. I think a lot has changed since then. We've gone through COVID. I think a lot of our traffic patterns have changed. Our community has come out and expressed some real concerns around Ski Hill Road. We've changed codes. It's really a very different playing field. So I just, in relation to the density, it seems that we're spending a lot of time comparing to the old, and I think that's a dangerous thing to do. I think we should really vet this to the code and stay away from comparing this so much to the previous. So those are my comments.
So just to clarify, you basically you're saying that any parking above what is required for the building then should count as density? Is that what you're?
No, I don't think it should be, yeah, well, but if that's the way, that's the intricacy of the code, Chris, where I'm not really clear. The applicant asked to add the parking places. Are they asking for free density for those parking? I guess they are, so. Then
Yeah, I think that what we're pointing out is that was maybe not the intention of the density policy, because they could build an above ground parking structure, just like unearth that and put a 12-inch strip and have none of it counted as density. But I think that we'd probably all agree that having it completely buried is actually a better design. There, as the code's written now, the parking and the parking structure on parcel 2 would not count as density, which would be much more visible.
And I hear you, but I think an even better design would be to not build it at all. And just utilize what's already up there, because you eliminate 70 cars that way. So
Well, that's what I'm saying. The part above what's required for the building would be counted, is what you're saying, that you wouldn't want a waiver for anything above that. What's required.
Todd?
Yeah, I appreciate where Dick's head's at on trying to make the situation on Ski Hill better. I am comfortable as is. Basically, to me, I've got more concerns about the traffic circle or lack thereof down on Ski Hill and Park. That's for a later discussion.
Okay. This is actually the question is the council comfortable with proposed density and programming? So if you could answer.
Yeah, I'm good.
First. Yeah.
I'm good with the programming and the density.
Okay. Thank you. Jay?
I am as well.
I am, and on the garage issue, I think it was pointed out in our code that underground, it wasn't our intention to count that as density, so I'm fine not counting that and also putting it on our list to review that code.
Yeah, I'm good with the programming. I think they've done a good job of working within the parameters. I'm very concerned that if we say you can't have these 75 spots, it's really going to only impact staff and people who work in our community. I totally hear you on the traffic issue. And I just think that the 75 employees shouldn't be the ones who are going to be burdened with this. And I understand that they could use existing parking, but we know that that's difficult to reel it back in from the way it's been used. So I think what this just shows is we have to have a commitment to traffic on 4 o'clock. And that's going to be between BGV, the town, and Vail Resorts. Hopefully that everybody will work together to figure that situation out.
Yeah, I'm okay with the density of the programming. I still don't mind looking at what was planned there before, because I think it does give a relevant benchmark to what we already approved. And while that building wouldn't necessarily fly anymore because of changes we've made to the code, it's still good because I remember what we were doing there and why. So I do like referring back to that piece. With the 75 parking spots, I don't think we can look at the parking in just this small bubble. I do think we need to refer to what, if we're going to go down this road and talk about it more, I'd like to see a broader discussion about what was due up there with the 220 and where this fits. And honestly, this 75 parking spots doesn't create nearly the difficulty on Ski Hill as skier drop off does. And if anything, I'd like to press the ski area on the skier drop off piece, which is the worst thing that happens for traffic up there. I mean, that's way more than 75 cars that are utilizing that skier drop off. So at some point in our broader discussions with Vail Resorts, that I know they've said tough crap, we're not going to do anything about that, but that does need to be a discussion. I don't know how we get to that, and even the configuration they have right now is terrible. The pull in, pull out of the same single, I can't believe we even allowed that originally in that, but I think that's way more important. If we could solve that and leave this, I'd be okay with that. So
I think there are probably some creative opportunities there, and we'll work like we have with the ski area. I've heard Jay say the same thing. And so I've got some ideas, and we'll try and bake those a little bit more thoroughly and bring it back next time we talk.
thank you. Okay, we are on to Cucumber Gulch.
All right, well, we all understand
Where she leads.
we all understand the importance of Cucumber Gulch and it's obviously a high objective to either improve the gulch or maintain the existing conditions. I'm zooming in on the existing detention facility at the base of Peak 8, which is in the preventative management area of the gulch, which has really strict rules in terms of development and what can happen. I did write a fairly lengthy kind of history of the PMA. And I don't think we need to recap it that much, but I think the main point is there is a variance procedure. That's one of the things I think that was fairly well thought out when we did the PMAs. We knew that there'd be certain circumstances where we needed to be able to go in and make improvements that actually would benefit the gulch. And we've done that numerous times for both Peak 7 and 8. And yes, based on the previous building, that we would need a similar detention and other drainage improvements in this general area, kind of in the uplands just above the wetlands of the gulch. We believe that there is ample precedent for going through the variance procedure. We think that's the correct way to handle it at the site specific level. So we don't think there should be any waivers from the PMA at this time, and we should expect that the facilities should be designed so that they could meet the variance criteria if this is where in fact they would be located. And based on every design that we've seen, that's where they kind of need to be. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions. And I point out that there were previous public benefits in the Lionheart Development Agreement, specifically a $2 per paid room night fee that would go to a dedicated environmental improvement fund. And we think that should be carried forward in this development agreement. And then there was another lump sum fee that was also a commitment to the gulch. So we think that just kind of carrying some of those commitments that are previously recommended under the previous development agreement. But with that, I'd be happy to take any questions related to the Cucumber Gulch.
Chris, could we start on that, the fee? Would there be a way Mike and team are amenable to tie it to short-term rental nights, not specifically hotel nights? Because we've lost like 100+ hotel rooms.
Oh, I see what
mean,
you're saying.
please.
Yeah, I think what we yeah, that's a very good point, Carol.
Mhm.
I think that we'd probably recommend like any room night.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Short-term rent, yeah, any rented room night, whether it's a hotel or one of the condominiums
Yeah, or
we'll agree to add the $2 to short-term rental component of that. For sure. We also are, Chris, we'll get to this, but we'll stand by the commitment of the previous development agreement for the $125,000 contribution to the Gulch. And have no problems. We have historical success working with staff on the variance process at both Peak 7, Peak 8, 2 different times. And so no worries on our part whatsoever. So yes, we'll add the $2 for short-term rents throughout.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chris, do you mind taking me through, and I think I'm just behind the ball on this. You said that a second ago, I thought I heard you say that at this time, there is no reason to waiver from the PMA standards. In the packet, it says that we have to grant, in the development agreement where I need to grant variances on the PMA standards. Can you just take me through what I'm missing on that? And I guess.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the other asks are asking whether it's like a second curb cut or something where there isn't a straightforward contemplated variance procedure baked into the code for that specific ask. So they're asking for those commitments up front in the form through the development agreement. In this case, we think it's a more appropriate time to go through the variance procedure that's outlined in the PMA ordinance based on their design at the site specific level than saying we're to have not have the PMA criteria applied to you through the development agreement. And part of that's just that I'm trying to think how many previous variants you've gone through, but I think it's at least 4, probably the most. I mean, the East Peak 8 Hotel, we went through the variants for that. Previous to that, we went through the parking structure, the Stables parking structure up there. There was also the over on Peak 7 for Mike's previous building over there and Crystal Peak Lodge that have the detention facilities there. So we have, it's something by doing it enough. We understand the procedure and, but we think it should be handled at that level versus being addressed where we maybe give more carte blanche in the development agreement.
Yeah, so essentially the development agreement's not going to say anything about that.
Understood. So that'll go through the master plan, the Peak 7-8 master plan process. That's where that lives.
It would actually it'd be at the site specific level. So
Okay.
we look when we're really getting into the fine grained details and they're working with Shannon and, you know, some other consultants to design the best detention and filtration system that they're looking at there. And then we can apply the variance procedure to that versus at this level where like, we know there's to be a large building. We know that the water quality facility is likely going to be in that area of the gulch. And this waiving stuff that we maybe don't need to waive, but there's a very, you know, we don't like to give variances really for any, like the way our code's set up for very, very many things. But this is one where we actually did contemplate and acknowledge that there probably would be need to be some variances just due to the really strict nature of the PMA.
Chris, in the PMA variance procedure, thanks for the background, everything. Is Ecometrics, the group that largely manages and monitor Cucumber Gulch, are they involved in that variance procedure?
Usually we have, I don't believe that Ecometrics is they're probably involved at the last one, but I think it's more almost engineering of looking at what standard they're made to, where Ecometrics is really looking at kind of holistically the health of the gulch and the water movement, where this is almost like another layer that's even more technical than what Ecometrics is doing. This is where we're having engineers on both sides look at what the discharge and different rates for storm events and things of that nature, where Ecometrics has benchmarks on a yearly basis of how the health of the gulch. Obviously, I think their reports are factored in the design of the other engineering firms that are designing it, and then our own engineering staff. But I think it's even a layer deeper than what Ecometrics is reviewing.
Okay,
For us.
thank you.
Yeah, Ecometrics is
Yeah.
like the baked in monitoring, long-term monitoring, which is
Mhm.
good, because then we can see if
Yeah,
what the
the whole
engineering, if it's working.
And once again, what we're talking about is a variance from the PMA, which extends out like 300 feet minimum from wetlands areas. So we're not necessarily talking about disturbing directly wetlands, but that buffer area beyond that.
Mhm.
So Chris, in talking to staff, it sounds like the drainage pond that you are showing here is for the on-site drainage management, but then in the previous proposal, there was off-site drainage management that Lionheart was responsible for and agreed to. Can we just make sure that everyone's on the same page, that would still be something that BGV is willing to work with us on?
Yeah, and this technically is offsite, but there's an easement that's granted to the property. So that's another layer that
Yeah,
I wouldn't say complicates, but actually identifies that it's
but that's for the water that comes off of their actual parcel, right? And then there's another drainage management, either pond or something for the snow that's coming through the parcel from the ski area?
from
I
the
understand.
from the pipe. Yeah, I mean, what they would have to design for their site specific is for their own property. There was some discussion about could you make greater drainage improvements for the ski area as a whole as a result? And the previous response was, it was something that was kind of out of the control of the owner of that and was much more difficult. So there was really a hesitancy on the part of the previous applicant to say that, that's a much bigger issue than they felt comfortable with
Yeah. and I
dealing as part of
understand
that application.
I do understand that. I think this is the water that's coming through their site and in the previous owners agreed to dealing with that water rather than just letting it flow through. Exactly. So I just want to make sure that maybe today's not the time, but that we can work with the applicant to make sure that that portion of the drainage management plan is still going to be constructed.
Yeah, anything that's associated with really their developments, not only for parcel 4, but if they're developing home sites up there, will have to be accounted for and managed. And will need obviously a lot of information, prior to site specific or subdivisions in the case of the single family lots.
Okay. And Shannon Smith will be providing oversight for all of that.
Yeah, and we'll need, outside resources, really that the applicant will have to be responsible for financially to
Okay.
make sure it's designed properly and we have the correct guidance.
Yes, we're committed to that and committed to what was previously agreed to. And I just want to be clear, the word variance, I think gets used in two contexts here. We're not seeking a variance from the variance process, right? We want to abide by the variance process.
Okay. Thanks.
Is everybody in first, any questions on this? Any other questions?
One last question.
Yeah.
On the contribution to the Environmental Improvement Fund, what is the rationale of having a finite term of 20 years? Isn't this something where we should be looking at a continuous indefinite term?
I think that was just what was previously negotiated between the previous applicant and the council.
It just seems that it would have effects beyond
20 years.
20 years, but I was just curious what the background on that was.
Yeah, I think it was just like, that's a fairly length of time, but it's not infinite. And that's just where they came to. So obviously we'll take input from the council in terms of the duration as well.
I'm gonna dig in on that one. No, I'm fine with, that's it. You can extend it if you want to. That's fine.
I was just curious.
No,
what
I
the
mean, it's fair.
background
It's a fair question. I'd never thought of it. So I don't know why I don't know why the previous applicant had a limit on that, and it's inconsequential to us. So I have no objection to that.
How's everybody feel about this part of the discussion with the PMA? Are we okay moving stuff to site specific for the variance process? And the applicant's already agreed to the money piece, so what kind of term, Jay, are you thinking? Longer than 20 years?
I guess as long as it adds to the
As long as there's water coming down the hill.
Might not be that long.
That's with the building.
Yeah, runs with the building.
Building.
You just put it in perpetuity.
All right,
Thank
other than that, everybody good with this part?
Yep, I am. I reiterate Kelly's point of managing that water coming through the site from off-site above. But I think you made the point there. And it was previously agreed to by Lionheart, so.
Yeah, I think anytime there's a project, I mean, most recently would be the Chair 5 improvement. And every time that there's something on the ski area, we try to get some improvement out of it. So that with the kids castle being removed and regrading and, worked with Jim Teston and his team to try and hopefully we'll get some improvement out of that project as well.
Yeah, and
think we
in
will.
the Environmental Improvement Fund, that's a part from the last one I liked, so. So I'm good with the last
Pick and
one.
choose, pick and choose. Kelly, you good? Todd, are you okay with this?
I'm great. Thanks.
All right. We're gonna take a quick 5 minutes and then go on to Ski Hill Road traffic.
refill. So see if paint
Sudden.
He'll be here.
Heat
Oh, shit.
at, one of my buildings,
It's cold.
not the hardest one this time.
Good. All right, we are back in session and we move on to Ski Hill Road traffic.
All
Chris?
right. Well, thanks again. Our third of kind of four main items here, Ski Hill Road traffic. We did supply the previous traffic study that was completed in February 2020 for you to look through. And then also our third-party traffic analysis that was performed by Charles Buck of Felsberg, Holton, Ullevig. Obviously, this is a different program than what was previously there, but has is still somewhat in the ballpark between the reduction of cars in the parking garage from 333 down to 279. But then when we factor in the number of single family homes that are to be upstream as well, it's kind of a wash in terms of total number of parking spaces between really sites 4, 5, and 6 as compared to previous. The programming obviously is slightly different from the whole ownership, larger hotel component to now a fractional and hotel. So we wanted to include that. The applicant has obtained a more recent traffic study, which we have not had the time to, we just obtained it this week. We could not review it in that time and also have a third-party consultant. So we thought it was better to have maybe a discussion around the previously approved traffic analysis as kind of the framework, but obviously there's other aspects Eric's already brought up, desire to limit or eliminate drop off and other items. So with that, I wish I had a better framework to kind of guide this conversation, but I think at this point, we'd really want to hear input from the council in terms of their concerns over, traffic impacts and mitigation requirements.
Okay,
Can I?
Yes,
can I
yeah.
Present some information. at this
yeah, I was
point?
gonna have questions first for where we're going for Chris. Anything for staff? No? Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I need to switch back. Sorry, Helen. Helen's got to do the juggling act here. Thanks, guys. Find that spot. Sorry, get there quick. Over there. Cover Gulch is next. Sorry for the delay. Okay, Ski Hill Road traffic. So, we spent a lot of time, and I talked with Dick earlier this week. I mean, we agree there's going to be, to Chris's point, it's basically the same number of cars when you factor in the single family homes or different use type. And so, someone that's staying in a hotel room, they're eating out, they're not cooking in. And so they're either eating on property or driving to town through the shuttles. People in homes are going to be cooking in, whether they're in our condos or in the room in their own homes. But I don't want to quibble about the car counts going up on Ski Hill Road. I mean, they will. And the traffic report that Chris referenced that we finished in July of 2023 is consistent with the recommendations that were put forth in the traffic study that happened in 2020. Specifically talking about different controls. And I would just, when you get a chance to read this prior to the next discussion on this, I'd point out two things to highlight. One was that this new report talks about a pedestrian scramble at the intersection of Ski Hill and Main, which may not sound relative, that it impacts Ski Hill and Park, but it does in that report. And the scramble is where you've got all 4 lanes of traffic stopped and people just as the word implies, they go any which way they want to go. That along with changing the queue lengths of the traffic signals will improve the level of service. And I'll just let you guys to read that, evaluate it, have that be audited by staff before you draw your own conclusions, I guess, on that one. But there's something coming. I think that there's some opportunities to use technology today to have a significant impact immediately on what's happening on Ski Hill Road.
So that's at the signal at Ski Hill and Park and Ski Hill and Main, or just Ski Hill and Park?
I think that there's opportunities that it talks about a community-wide signaling strategy. And so in fairness to staff, I think I need to go through that in a more comprehensive fashion, but it is I think that it's not correct to look at Ski Hill Road at Park Avenue intersection in isolation, because it getting backed up is a function of what else is happening throughout the community. And so that implies that there are community-wide solutions that can improve that particular intersection. What I'd come back to, though, is the idea that while the car counts are going to increase on Ski Hill Road, the vehicular count, because we're not building one larger building in the core of town, goes down. And, you know, you can only drain water from the bathtub so fast, right? And so if there's less building in the core of town, then when there's egress patterns and you're not egressing another building in the core of town, the whole community is going to flow better. And that's the point of this process, I think, is to say, can we build less as a community? And in doing so, can we as a developer be satisfied with vacating one of these entitlements in favor of taking two down to one? And to me, that's where the magic lies in this, is to say that, yes, it is going to increase cars on Ski Hill Road. Yes, there's technology that we can use to improve the management of traffic and congestion in the community. And yes, having less tourist beds in our community is meaningful, small but meaningful impact on overall community congestion. So I try and look at this in a more global, holistic fashion than just isolating that particular intersection. To your point, Ski Hill Road in Maine, changing those signals and having, I don't know, they talk about the optics in the traffic lights. I don't understand all that stuff. I'll leave that for others to weigh in on. But I think that globally it gets better.
Do we have the ability to affect the signaling on Highway 9?
That's decided by CDOT.
And will they listen to us if we ask for it?
We could suggest and work with them, but if it falls outside of parameters that they don't support, then probably not.
Okay.
And I guess that was my point I just made, is that I think globally this is a better solution because there's fewer net cars in the community, easier egress patterns. There are a multitude of organic efforts that I don't want to get into counting cars. An organic effort would be for us to say, by way of example, that we would have the majority of our fractional guests check in to start their week on Sunday as opposed to Saturday. Right. When you look at any of these reports, they talk about the peak hours on Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon they use that as the pinch point. Like, this is the most painful part of the whole thing, is those two time frames. And so organically, if we can do things like by saying that we would do by saying that 70% of our check-ins would occur for week starts would occur on Sunday versus Saturday, that will have an impact to reducing those pinch points on Saturday morning versus a Sunday morning arrival. And so, we can do things like that. And there's a variety of other things that we're committed to continuing to do.
Mike, do you do that when you sell a unit, then those dates begin on the Sunday rather than the Saturday?
It really depends on if it's a fixed week or a floating week. So if somebody bought a fixed week, it would declare that it starts on Saturday or Sunday for 7 days. If they buy into a week that their use can change every year, then they're subject to their reservation and the rules that go with that reservation. So if a floating week owner they wanted to rent the third week in March, the only available week might be one that starts on a Sunday, and they have to live with that. We do that to a limited extent today. 3 buildings. I don't want my operations people will probably say that I'm going to get this wrong, but generally there's a couple. The 3 buildings are are checked in on different days to manage housekeeping staff more than arrival relative to traffic. Right. But I know that what we can do because of that experiment, or not experiment, that practice, I know that we can do that with the goal of decreasing some of these peak time pinch points. So it will help us on the housekeeping side logistically. It helps the community on the traffic management side. So signal timing and pedestrian scramble, I'll let you guys read this and for your own. This was a highlight pull out, but their view is that changing the count time on the lights will have a significant impact on the level of service. Everyone seems to be, oops, sorry.
Oh, I thought we were gonna read.
I didn't, Kelly was up there reading it and I
Oh, it's
clicked
okay.
off of it.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay.
But I was actually reading the date, so that's July 2023. Is
Yes.
that same, was that same language in the? I guess I'm just wondering,
It's
have we
cl-
already
it-
had this discussion with CDOT and they've said no? Shannon, yeah.
They did make some changes last time this came around, but they are in the opinion.
Is there ever an opportunity for us to say, it's not working, would you be willing to try something else? Chris?
Yeah, CDOT's always open to speak with us, but we've had this discussion with them, I don't know, at least 5 times since I've been in this position about optimizing that signal, and they have done what they believe to be their best for the corridor.
So I think the important part though is what Mike said earlier, which is, yes, if you're only toying with that signal, then it probably is optimized. But if you look at more of the signals, because we know that the right-hand turn coming off of 4 o'clock is backed up. So,
Or
No, well, that's
yeah,
Mhm.
and so, you know,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, do you think there's an opportunity here for like a little bit more of a wholesale change that really could help? Or is this like just signal timing is just kind of like, yes, that's something everyone always throws out. We can't do anything about it. That's not going to help us.
more the latter. So CDOT looks at their signals on Highway 9. So they would look at, Ski Hill and Park, Airport Road and Park, Valley Brook, and through there.
Mhm.
And those signals aren't coordinated with the technology that CDOT uses in other jurisdictions because we have old signals. So they're limited on the way they can coordinate their system just based on that. Mike's talking about looking at our other signals throughout town. That would be a huge traffic study effort if we want to go there. If the applicant wants to go there, we can. The pedestrian scramble he's throwing out there, we actually tried that. And it was deemed to be a huge failure, the way it backed up traffic along Main
Barn
Street.
dance.
Yeah, the barn dance, yep.
Yeah, that was.
So we tried that. We didn't like the way it functioned for the rest of our road system. So just saying, yeah, we should look at the whole town holistically. That's an option, but that's, a 6 to 12 month review, honestly, to collect all that data and really look at all of our intersections. So I'm a little skeptical just saying that that's going to improve.
I just have to add too that keeping Park Avenue moving was a priority of ours and has been a priority of ours because it tends to back up and we get gridlock in there during peak periods. And so we maximize signal alignments over the years to increase traffic flow on Park Avenue and to maintain that flow. And we've always known that if we, minimize traffic lights along Park with more roundabouts, that would self-correct some of that stuff with the one area that it's just really hard for us to do, which is Park and Ski Hill. I mean, we have a huge issue at Village Road during peak periods. Traffic backs up there trying to get it out onto to Park Avenue.
I think what we do need to do for coordination with this project as well is look at the way Ski Hill and French and Airport Road are going to function more so than anything.
Shannon, with the amount of space we have at that intersection, I think Mike might have brought up a schematic of a roundabout. Knowing that that's probably not feasible, is there room or are there strategies to do other things at the base of, at that intersection of having a right hand only turn lane, a left hand only, a straight lane, and being able to queue cars up in the proper form ahead of time? Or is that really not?
We-
Is that not
yeah.
effective?
We need to study, and it was included in the access permit that was granted eventually for East Peagate Hotel to improve the length of the queue lanes at that intersection, primarily on Park Ave. So there is some room for improvement for lengthening each of those turn bays. We are constrained by the amount of right of way we have. So I don't know how much, we would have to study it a bit more, how much we can affect longer queue bays on Ski Hill. We do need to look at it, but it was studied pretty extensively for Park Ave, and CDOT did mandate some improvements to those turn lanes on Park
And those did not happen because
because the project didn't go forward with East Peagate.
do you, I guess without just kind of off the cuff, do you feel like it would be effective and it would be possible to increase the queue lanes on Ski Hill coming down to Park?
Not very easily. We're constrained by right of way there. You know how there's retaining walls on both sides. I don't think we own much of the property outside of those retaining walls. So we would be having to ask for right of way dedication from the adjacent private properties. And I'm not sure how that would go.
Thank you.
Shannon, do you expect CDOT to require another access permit?
Absolutely. I think they would likely approve a permit very similar to the one they approved for the prior East Peagate
So
Hotel.
asking the applicant in conjunction with this project to
Mhm.
expand those turn lanes. Do you think there's room if we were to approach the private owners to increase the right of ways? To allow for lengthening of the turn lanes?
There could be. I mean, we would have to look at it, but it seems like the buildings are set back a bit from
Yeah.
Ski Hill, just picturing it in my head.
Cause I'd really like to do that. I just keep going back to doing anything possible we can do to improve this
Yeah,
intersection.
CDOT generally won't mandate improvements to our right of ways. They'll mandate the improvements for Park Ave, but not for Ski Hill.
But they're already mandating lengthening those turn lanes, so it's already mandated, so
For
we
the
can.
Park Ave ones, but if we want to look harder at Ski Hill and what it would take, we could ask the applicant to do that.
And is there like a parking group, or I'm sorry, traffic and parking group along with the ski area? Like does the town of Breck meet with the ski area and talk about parking and traffic?
Matt Hulsey's group meets with them to talk about parking. I've never met to talk about traffic flow specifically outside of development permits.
I just think like the lowest hanging fruit is that skier drop off. And
Yeah.
it seems like before we do any big physical impacting construction and agreements and things like that, it seems like we should really be begging them to look at their drop.
Oh, the previous,
Meet twice a year with them, and we could meet more often as needed, but, and we address traffic flows, parking, all of that type of
Have we
stuff. with
talked
them.
about that skier drop off with them on P-Gate?
It's on the radar screen, right?
Yeah,
We-
and we did, in the meeting we had with them the other day, Jody did mention that they have moved some of their skier drop off, not so much your ordinary skier drop off, but your group drop off. They've moved that down to the North Gondola a lot. And so we didn't get into what's left up there, but I think they know that that's a concern and we can definitely bring it up with them.
and Jody kind of laughed when I brought it up, and the fact that she goes, well, it's all the locals that are dropping off their kids there. And so, yeah, if you want us to not allow that, that's, you know, it was off the cuff, but it was very much like, yeah, sure. You know, whatever, if that's what you want, that's fine, but
I
just
don't
know
know.
that it's an effect.
And I think it's some of the teams that aren't managed by the resort who drop off up
Sure.
there from my observations.
I just think this seems like the place to
Easy,
start.
it's the easiest.
Mhm.
step to
really
control.
does.
And you'll have to get heavy handed at some point.
Mhm.
So it's the only way you're gonna change years and years of behavior.
But I mean, starting with the teams and just having Vail Resorts say you cannot meet at the base area of Peak 8, that would be like
Yeah, you
a
have to meet,
ton
at
of
the-
cars.
you have
Mhm.
to meet at the base of the gondola.
Yes, yeah. I think we should try to pursue that. I would like to see that. I don't know how others feel up here.
I mean, it's the most obvious because, I mean, I see that out the
Yeah.
window and it's
I do that.
just based on the time of days, right?
Yeah.
It's so obvious.
Everybody does it. I mean,
And I'm in agreement. We can't really build our way out of our traffic problems anywhere in town. So it's managing our guests, managing our locals, managing our traffic. That's really gonna be the changes, not retiming signals, but the developer can only do so much. And we can only ask them to mitigate so much. And that management piece, I think, falls outside of that often.
Yeah.
okay, Mike, go ahead and continue.
I wanted to briefly touch on real estate transfer tax. And I think that there are millions available for infrastructure improvement in the future. If you just take a close look at real estate transfer tax, I'll skip this first part. But the second one where that second red arrow is, what I did is I went and looked at Ricardo's square footage or East Peak Gate's previous approval. And factored in a $2,000 per foot sales price for his condominiums. That results in 210 million in sales or $2.1 million in transfer tax. Our project, the way we sell our condo and subdivide it into 52 pieces of pizza, and then sometimes give people every other year use. And then in particular, when someone trades in with us, it creates a secondary real estate transfer tax effect. So Eric, if you had a unit that you and Sarah bought for $100 and it was a summertime unit, but you wanted to turn that into a wintertime use, then you come into the sales process and you give us back that $100 deed, that's a transfer event. And then we re-execute another $150 deed back to you. That's another transfer event. And so you get this because of the way we do business, and we have our owners will upgrade on average between 5 and 6 times over the course of their lifetime of ownership. So not only do we get the benefit of subdividing our piece of pizza into 52 slices, but this in and out nature of the trade ins and trade outs result in significant transfer tax. The chart up above shows what we've historically done, that yellow arrow, the 15.75. That's what we've paid or our owners have paid in transfer tax since 2008 because of the activity at Grand Lodge on Peak 7 and Grand Colorado on Peak 8. So you can see, compared to One Ski Hill Place and Crystal Peak Lodge, which is the green arrow, we generated 12.7 million more in transfer tax than the whole ownership buildings do at the base. And so similarly on this project, because of all of the nuanced way we sell, we anticipate generating, if you just took the 2.1 as something that you want to put in the bucket of general capital infrastructure improvements, my position would be that because of how we sell, it creates this massive incremental benefit of tax dollars that are available to discretion of future councils to deploy against capital needs on the Hill. I'm not saying we don't want to participate in solving it, but I am saying that a byproduct of our sales methodology is a substantial tax benefit to the benefit of future councils to deploy more money.
What's the time frame on that?
That's so that you can see that,
Time, or is that?
yeah, this is 15 years here,
Okay.
where this is like 15 minutes. Because they sell the building and they close it all on the same day kind of thing. The 2.98 that you see on this red arrow from Crystal Peak and One Ski Hill, there was the initial sales, and then it's basically like 5% per year, the inventory that's sold and repurchased. So it's nominal, but it adds up. It's a perpetuity thing with the real estate transfer tax. But the majority of the 2.98 occurs, like I said, in the first 15 minutes. Ours is over 15 years.
Okay.
And that's all I have on Ski Hill Road.
Okay, questions? Questions for either applicant or staff? Okay, so we have two questions, but obviously we won't limit it to that because there's more to this. Does the council support including the above provisions in the new development agreement? And does the council have additional comments on traffic or roadway improvements? Who wants to start? Carol.
I think in our discussion, we talked a lot about it, that, we need to look at it more holistically, but how much can we put on the development? So what staff laid out, and that the applicant has to obtain the CDOT access permit. I'm fine with that, but with an emphasis on seeing what we can do for skier drop off, and then also that whole Park Ave corridor and more in regard to traffic. So I don't have much more to add than what we've discussed on that.
Jake?
Echoing Carol, I don't know if there's a silver bullet here. I think we really need to explore every possible avenue, whether it's as we talked about, increasing the queuing lanes, having multiple turn lanes so that there is a right, straight, left coming out of Ski Hill, looking at ski area policies, and going back to Dick's comment in the beginning of the meeting, is that the more parking spaces you have up there, they're not to sit empty, right? They're going to get used. And so just having an eye on how much parking we allow up there, and if there is that high priced option where guests are tempted to go up and roll the dice to try to get a spot in one of the stables lots or any of the others that are available for hourly or day use, and really looking at that as well as an option to try to mitigate our guests from going up there, seeing there's no spots, coming back down Ski Hill and doing that loop. How do we avoid that? Obviously it's not feasible, but you look at Beaver Creek and how they have like that little guard shack that you walk up, or that you drive up to, and they're like, "Hey, welcome to Beaver Creek. What, where are you going? What are you trying to do?" And you see how many people, turn around.
Say hello.
I'd say welcome to Beaver Creek.
I go, they love me. They see the beat up pickup truck and I'm their clientele. What can I say? But all right, so if that's probably not in the land of reason, but what is, and what are, like, let's put out every single option. Let's whiteboard it and see what is feasible and what's not.
So I have a question for Mike, because one of the provisions was this 1,600 vehicle trips per day, and then for every 100 trips in excess, the developer will acquire and transfer one additional shuttle van. And I know during your spiel, you said, I'm not interested in counting cars. So is that something that you're trying to not, like your management of having guests come on Sundays and other days, is that so that you wouldn't do this?
No, what I meant was I didn't want to get in a debate about how many cars were on Ski Hill Road.
Okay.
We are happy to have a trip meter in and out of the garage, and so that it can be audited by the town, consistent with what the previous thing was, so that if we need to add more shuttles, we will.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, Jay, well said. There is no silver bullet. I think we need to click the needle every chance we get on this, and I think our community's told us that loud and clear. So to the parking thing, and I'm not going to beat that horse again, but it still applies. So the access permit, and I think that's important. And I think it's important that we explore taking that a little bit further and see if we can get some increased size of some of the right of ways, both on Park and Ski Hill Road, and take a holistic approach on how we can, approach that. I think anything that CDOT requires is 100% up to the applicant to accomplish. If we go further, then I think we can take a more collaborative approach. And I think we should, where possible. I would like to see the applicant also, while we're working on that Ski Hill Park intersection, bring the pedestrian crossing up to code and up to ADA standards, which it's not now. I don't think it's a huge ask, but I think it's important. The trip counter, I like just because it gives us some data and also gives a trigger point to help manage those shuttles. I also would like to try to capture Timber Trail. And I know people say, well, it's just single family lots with not much traffic. Well, there's going to be a tremendous amount of traffic for 20 years as they build that out, or 10 years, because we all know construction traffic is significant. And so I'd like to capture that and understand that if we could reduce some of the guest traffic that, you know, if we could get them on shuttles to offset some of that construction traffic, that would certainly help Ski Hill Road. You know, I think we need to, just a general comment. I think we as council need to set our standards higher than Ds and Fs on these intersections, you know, level of service. We keep referring back to these studies, but we need to remember these studies told us that our level of service is Ds and Fs. So I think that's a pretty low standard to go for. So that's why I'm maybe the aggressive guy up here and trying to push on this stuff. I think it's really important. So everything we can do to try to, you know, get the Fs to Ds and Ds to Cs, I think super important. You know, Peak 8 has developed quite a bit over the years. And, you know, I think the applicants got the majority of the development up there. So, you know, the sum of the pieces kind of factoring and I think plays here a little bit. And so I think we need to keep that big picture and that historical picture in line. You know, when the gondola went in, it did not contemplate a lot of parking up at Peak 8. It actually contemplated very little, if any. So I think we should really look at the master plan in relation to that, you know, the recreation parking required. And I'd love to really read the details on that and understand it a little better. Because that seems to me to be in conflict with the original gondola agreements way back when the community threw in 50 million for the gondola in whenever that was, 03. Skier drop off. Yeah, we should certainly prioritize that. And I agree with Rick. Unfortunately, we might have to, you know, work pretty hard on that one. So I think those are my comments.
Kelly?
I would agree with what Dick said wholeheartedly about the Z's and F's is not good enough, but I think the whole conversation of just having the applicant be one piece of probably, you know, a 3-entity group, which is Town of Breck, Vail Resorts, and BGV. I think that's what's really important to me, because I think the probably we can get a lot closer if all 3 of us are participating. The other thing I'd really like to see, and I don't even know if this is something that, or how this would work exactly, but, you know, to have Mike do all this work and say, like, we think this will work, and I'm excited about this from the traffic study, and then to have Shannon come down and say, we've done this stuff all in the last 5 years, we've tried this and that. And so I guess I would just really love to see Shannon be more a part of this parking and traffic discussion, like earlier on, not after you guys have developed something, but sit down, you know, early and often to find out what we've tried, what does work, what CDOT has talked about in the past, because it's just getting all the smart people in one room more consistently, I think would really help the situation.
Todd?
Yeah, it's obviously a zone that needs some work as we move forward here. I'm looking forward to seeing the new study and kind of what that's gonna shed light on. You know, to me, it comes back to process, and then, you know, how do we, what process we put in place to make this better, and then what sort of leverage or incentive does all the participants have to contribute to make it better? That to me is kind of a concern, because it's gonna, you know, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. You know, I know Mike had shown a 2-lane traffic circle didn't fit with the space there. You know, have we looked at a 1-lane? And then, yeah, I'd love to have some sort of agreement in place on, like, here's how we're all invested in this together moving forward to make it successful. And then how do we measure it? So yeah, the process to me is really key.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, you know, I agree with Kelly's comments about having all 3 entities spend more time trying to manage this situation and come up with some real management options. I think drop off at the base area is a big deal. I know there are locals that are going to be pissed, but locals are always also the ones that are pissed that the light doesn't really work at Ski Hill. So, you know, at some point, there's only one way to fix the situation, and that's going to not be super favorable to everybody, but it's got to be done, right? I would like to look at extending the queuing on Ski Hill Road. I think the developer is going to have his requirements from CDOT. You know, some stuff is on us just to fix because that's what government's supposed to do. I mean, that is our real mission, is to do things like this. So I think we should approach those homeowners and look at some of that. I would like you to think about even some further management of sales, and not Saturday, Sunday drop off, but even midweek drop off. And if there's something like that that's available where, or not drop off, but you know,
Yeah.
like Wednesday, you know, because if you're 7 days from Sunday, that means you're leaving on Saturday. But if you're 7 days from Monday or Tuesday, you're leaving on a Monday. So if there is a way to work that into your grand scheme of how you sell stuff, you know, I don't know if that moves the needle at all, but every little bit helps.
72.
And it helps I-70. And it's also, you know, in some cases cheaper to fly or cheaper to do things on a weekday. I don't know if that's something, but something to look at. And then I would say, just from a town standpoint, and this is outside of the scope of what the developer's doing, but at some point, we need to figure out the best use of the facility that we just spent a lot of money building. And I know for us, a lot of it is about recapturing some of the dollars we spent, but there may be other ways to use the structure where we can capture or long-term provide or do a deal with a ski area where they can put some people in the structure, and they can put people on that upper deck of the structure, and it comes out of the net that we owe them or something, in order to limit some of the traffic they're going to need up there. You know, ski patrol, I think, need to be prioritized by all 3 of the entities, because they need to be up there early in the morning. Otherwise, you constantly hear, why is T-Bar not open yet? But there are other people that work for the ski area that don't have that necessity to be there that early in the morning, not at dark 30, whatever time those guys get up there to start their routes. Before the gondola, yeah, right. There are other employees up there, though, that can utilize the gondola that the ski area and the town paid for. And if we can work some kind of deal where they get some parking on either of our properties and we can figure that out, I think that would help to mitigate some of this also. Those are just a couple of thoughts. I mean, this is obviously a larger problem than just what you are adding to the problem. And we really do need to, as a community and as a town government, think a little broader about some of these things.
I'll look forward to working with the town and in particular with Shannon, to make sure that we're good on parking with the ski resort. And so we're committed to the process, and we want to get it. We get that we're part of the problem. We also get that we're a big part of the solution, and we're creative thinkers and can help I think it's impacted in a positive way. So we'll do what we can to make that happen.
I should also add, that's not just ski patrol maintenance guys, everybody that has to be at the ski area prior to the gondola running. And maybe there's a shuttle option in some of this too. Maybe there's an additional shuttle option or the additional ability to ride a bunch of shuttles that you're already running. So, all right, Remp,
All right.
is that our next? What's our next point?
Shuttle from the ice rink.
Jesse's gonna come up and join me on this one.
John?
So,
Jesse?
as council's well aware, we recently adopted the REMP ordinance, and that requires that all outdoor energy use be offset either by placement of renewables like solar on site on rooftops to offset that energy use, or payment in lieu into a fee that goes into a overall fund that's used on energy efficiency projects. Chris, do you mind maybe pulling up the page with the outdoor energy use?
You walked out right when you needed her. Chris, don't screw it up, man.
It was, yeah.
It's a pillow guy.
But I don't know if it was.
Ooh,
I think it was.
hello, guy.
And Jim Jordan.
Nice.
Yeah, wow, 1-2
Yeah.
punch.
He's out of money now. His lawyers left him because he said he wouldn't be able to pay them, so they punched out.
He needs to figure out how to sleep well at night then.
Pillows are terrible.
Sorry.
Ellen.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I can just keep going, but I just wanted to kind of show you the area that was being proposed. We'll talk more about it. So in addition to the REMP requirements, we also amended policy 33R, which is our energy conservation policy. There's now more negative points associated with outdoor energy use. So with commercial projects, you get an exemption for your first 5,000 square feet of heated outdoor space. It still has to be offset, but you don't get negative points. Once you go beyond 5,000 square feet, every 500 square foot increment, there's a negative point associated with that in the development code through the development permit process. So that adds up pretty quickly. Anyway, bottom line on this is what BGV is requesting is two things. One is that they're able to address the offsetting of the outdoor energy use in a little bit different way, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then secondly, they are requesting a waiver from the point assignments for the negative point assignments. So it looks like we're pulling.
So that's
in-
the old one.
That's the old
And
one.
then if you go up one page.
Yeah.
There you go.
So this is the outdoor heated space right now that's being proposed. The good news about that is compared to that plan that you just saw below, which was the older one, REMP is in effect creating an environment where developers are looking at reducing this outdoor heated space significantly. The old East Peak Hotel had 51,000 square feet of outdoor heated space. What Mike's team here has shown, and they've done some exercises to reduce to the maximum extent they can. They're down to 20,000 square feet outdoor heated space. So REMP's working, bottom line, which is fantastic. That was the whole goal of this. A lot of the space has to do with the outdoor heated pools, the space right around those pools and hot tubs. And then those, I don't know what color that is, orange, red, those narrow strips, those are all emergency kind of egress sidewalks that they're proposing to heat as well. Some of the discussion we'll have is there's some ability for us to potentially waive some areas, for the building official to waive some of those areas for public safety concerns. So we may not be talking about the entire 20,000 square feet that would be subject to REMP or that would be subject to negative points, but that's something we would still have to evaluate more. What I do want to do now is just talk about what essentially the proposal is. The proposal is that BGV would utilize existing buildings that they have, such as the Grand Lodge on Peak 7, and they would maximize their potential for placing solar on rooftops on other buildings that they own, such as that. What they've indicated is the roof lines on this building are not necessarily conducive to putting much solar on this site itself, but they will utilize other sites to the maximum extent they can, offsite all this outdoor energy use on this new site. In addition to that, if they cannot fully reach that total offset, they would like the ability to be able to go offsite in terms of basically other areas in Colorado to potentially access solar gardens or wind gardens down on the Front Range and lock up long-term contracts to be able to utilize that for any remaining energy use that couldn't be accounted for with their existing buildings. And finally, the backstop staff has suggested on this, if we get to a point, and let's say 4 years from now, and they're building this building, or 5 years and they're nearing CO and they haven't been able to accomplish that in terms of getting those solar gardens from outside the area, that they would pay into the REMP for anything that remained in terms of any energy use was left. What we found and what Jesse's experience has been that there's takes a lot of time to get these solar gardens going. We've had companies approach us, it never materializes, or it takes a number more years than we think to actually get access to them. So the other thing I did want to point out, though, is what BGV, and this is one of the things staff is very obviously supportive of, is what they're saying is we're not just going to offset our exterior energy. We want to do it for the interior space as well. So there's no requirement, right now in our code that has to happen. We obviously have some pretty aggressive energy efficiency standards they have to meet in our existing code. But what they're saying is they want to do 100% offset for indoor use as well. And that's kind of their extra effort they're going to here on this issue. So as far as the proposal and then the staff's analysis of that, we're pretty supportive of them using other buildings. It's still in the community. It's still going to be a significant offset. It will accomplish essentially the same purpose. So we're supportive of that. And we obviously are supportive of both indoor and outdoor offsets. That's a bonus, and that's great. It's really our strong preference that we, to the maximum extent we can, we pursue these on-site on these properties. And so we'd want to have an independent analysis that says, yes, this is how much solar could be done on the Grand Lodge, for example, and some of these other buildings. so that we're certain that they've maximized their potential on their existing buildings before they go to the extent to going out of the county to get solar gardens or wind gardens. Let's see. I've gone over a few of these points. We're generally supportive of waiving the negative points on this. As you can recall, when we started in a REMP, we were not discussing additional negative points, but it did evolve that way after a number of discussions with council where we increased the negative points associated with outdoor heated space. But staff feels supportive of waiving those in this situation. You have to have a certain amount of outdoor amenity space in order to make these type of buildings work, right? And so the fact that they will be offsetting all the energy use is a key thing from staff's perspective. But if you look at how the negative points start to accumulate on this, it would make the project pretty much
Unbuildable.
impossible to accomplish. Chris already was talking about the -10 they're going to get for height to start with. We're looking at a minimum of probably another -11, maybe up to -30 for outdoor heated space. So given that in the situation, in the overall picture of things, staff could get our arms around that and support that. So that's an overview kind of the proposal. They have identified a desire to get some credit for what they have indicated as kind of advanced technology systems, systems where the heating tubes underneath your, say, heated plaza area or whatever, they're spaced further apart, but they still accomplish the same thing of melting the surface area, keeping the snow off it, but they do it much more efficiently. And so what staff has indicated is we'd be willing to look at, we've got a efficiency factor in our whole equation, the whole model for energy use that we'd be willing to adjust because of that. There's a list of items on page, I think it's 11 of the pack, but anyway, it talks about different things that BGE is willing to commit to, and those include providing for EV charging stations in amount that is above the level currently projected for EV needs, working with elevator partners on power regenerative elevators, reducing snow melt to the safest extent possible, on and on. There's a number of those. Those are listed. I'm not going to go through them all, but BGV has said they're committed to doing those. So that's essentially the overview. And we'd be glad, myself and Jesse, to answer any questions right now. I think Mike will have a little presentation too, and then we can finally get to our questions at the very end of this section.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I guess I looked at the 33R, and maybe I was using Jeffrey's math, but I saw it as -7 points for the outdoor heating. It was -4 to 5,000, and then -1 for every 5,000 after that would give us another -3, so that would be -7. Am I wrong on that?
So
One for every 500.
500, yeah.
it's -1, and the first
Commercial?
5,000. So there's two different, if it's for, there's a different formula if it's for 10 units or less. And then if, so you might be looking at that, Jay, but if you're looking at residential 10 units or more or commercial, the first 5,000 square feet is exempted. And then every 500 square feet after that accrues negative points.
What am I looking at then? On B, I don't know, somewhere in B on 33, it says for each additional 5,000 square feet or portion thereof of heated driveway, sidewalk, plaza over 5,000 square feet is -1.
Jay, are you looking at the code online?
Uh-huh.
It may not have been updated.
Well, that would be why. Yeah,
That's probably why it's different.
easy enough. And then
Easy.
I guess that makes sense. Is
Not a good look.
No.
with the energy, like the HERS index and like the energy saving, if the indoor energy use is mitigated, there's currently some points that can be used, positive points on 33R as well, right?
Yeah, there are for exceeding the code.
Okay.
Essentially, our code with, zero energy ready buildings, or we have the equivalent we look at with the larger projects. There is the ability to get additional points.
And that's
that
somewhere
way
around
too.
+6-ish if in the best case scenario.
Yeah, around there. Yeah, I don't have it pulled up. Yeah.
Jesse, couple questions. With our REM calculator, I thought that there was an opportunity to build in efficiency calculations. So how would what Mike's asking for differ from that?
It wouldn't. So what we need to do is change the background calculations on the efficiency, and we would need their engineers to provide the details and sign off on that. So we don't have that information now to put it in, but it is already pre-populated to be able to adjust that on the back end.
So that's a
They
process.
can't adjust it. They'd have to submit that information to us, and then we would do it on the back end.
So that's defined and there's data to support it. That was all
So
contemplated.
it's not defined, it's not codified, like it doesn't spell out how to do that, but the calculator provides for that. And it was always contemplated that if you can provide a system that you are arguing is more efficient and have your engineers sign off, that we would look at that.
Okay.
We
Great.
talked about that.
And Jesse, can you remind me, how does REM take into account outdoor kitchens?
So anything that's a piped natural gas appliance, so you're looking at your fire pits, fireplace, any fire element plus your ranges. You get for commercial, it's a 350,000 BTU budget. So the first 350,000 receives a 10% offset, and anything that exceeds that would have to do the 100% offset. So there's sort of a budget allowance. You'll see here that I believe they've gone from a couple of proposed fire pits to 0, and then they've increased gas grills. Gas grills are like a third of the BTU outputs as those natural gas fire pits. So they're even adjusting that there.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Does
Because
that
I
help?
noticed a couple outdoor kitchens. I don't know, was that an old version or current version? They were called out in some of these plans.
They might have been just barbecue areas.
Okay,
Yeah, with some tables for, your hot hamburger buns.
a kitchen.
Go back to charcoal.
And then
Favorite.
finally, Jesse, just to get an idea of how much energy is being used indoor versus outdoor, to see maybe where it's worth waiving points or making some concessions. So if they're willing to offset their interior use, that amount of energy compared to what would potentially be used outside, just a rough idea of just the energy scale.
Yeah, we haven't seen any of the energy modeling yet, but staff would prefer that they offset the outdoor energy use, primarily because our code is so tight on the building envelope that it's likely that the energy load inside is already, it's as efficient as it could be. And I do know that they use heat recovery systems and some other things that, at least they did at GC8. So, the outdoor thing is the priority because it's literally just spewing and there's nothing there to contain it and to be able to recover off of that. And so I don't know comparatively what 200,000 square feet versus the indoor load would be, but we really want to focus on that outdoor piece because there's no building envelope there to make it more efficient.
Mhm.
Other questions?
Is this only for Jesse? It's not for Mike yet.
Not for Mike, because Mike's gonna present something.
Yeah, just a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
Actually, I had
Yeah.
yeah, Jesse, just to confirm, I think I heard this right, but we already have a mechanism in the code to give positive points for managing our indoor energy use.
Yeah, so it kind of works in conjunction with the Zero Energy Ready Home program, which is the
Right.
building code, right? So, or not even that, but the International energy conservation code. So that makes it really, really tight and efficient on the building energy side. And then through that program, you have to submit a target HERS score, just to comply with the building code. And the development code allows for anything more efficient than that to gain positive points. Did I
So
say that
there's,
correctly?
there's mechanism in place for Mike and his team to take advantage of, better.
Yes,
managing
but
the-
I don't suspect that it's enough to overcome a 10, 15, 20%
Sure.
negative.
I just wanted to make sure there's a
That was
mechanism in
Thanks,
place.
Chris.
Was to clarify too, is since they're proposing to offset on some of their other buildings off-site, that wouldn't qualify, like by putting solar on the building in Peak 7 or the Breck Inn or other things, that wouldn't qualify for this point. So that's a little different why they would have to codify that in the development agreement.
Gotcha.
And spell out how they're offsetting, because if it was just all on site, it'd be really straightforward.
Right.
Yeah, there's two things that they're doing in the inside, what they're proposing. One is they'll have to be pretty efficient and they may go beyond our minimum code standards. They might be able to get negative or positive points. But then the offset is the actual energy being used is essentially going to be renewable energy. So that's another benefit of the whole proposal.
Okay. Mike?
If I can pick up on that, there's two elements on the building. There's and look, if I say something that's not correct, just please stop me immediately. Because this is not my wheelhouse, this energy policy, where it is yours. But there's the efficiencies in how we build it, which is where I think we have opportunities for positive points. Where there's not, the way we read the code, opportunity for positive points is in this commitment to offset the energy that's actually used to operate the building, right? That's a voluntary commitment on our part that per the code doesn't have, I'm not going to need this, Helen, thanks. So there's not a code component, which is why we're saying if we're going to be collaborative about this and the goal is to decrease the amount of energy used, right? And to have it primarily be, renewable sources of energy. We want to do that. And we're willing to accept the consequences of overuse, but we want to be in a space where we get some recognition for the positive things that we do that are not spelled out and not required in the code. And so we've done things at GC8 in terms of building efficiency, like, recirculating the energy used to heat the ice rink to redeploy that in the building. That's something that we did voluntarily at our own expense because we believe in doing the right thing. And it is important to us to have this on the table to say, these are commitments that we're making. And I don't feel like they should be viewed in a vacuum. So that is just kind of a little preamble there with respect to the points. There's no points for us to do energy offset for the actual energy used in the building. There's none. There's only the negative points for the energy used. Jesse's right, for the outdoor use, but there's nothing, to Carol's point, commensurate to offset that for the energy offset that occurs on the inside of the building once it's operable. So with respect to this drawing, the orange, red, whatever color that Mark and I want to call that, those are egress pathways. And so one of what we'd like to hear is that those egress pathways would be exempt from the heated concrete calculation because they're for public safety, for the residential safety. So that look at the one on the lower part of the screen, that's on the east side of the property. And that only exists. Everybody that's inside that building can exit through the building. Those sidewalks on the outside are only for egress. And so if there's not an exemption, then we won't heat those. If there is an exemption, we will heat those. And that's what this is about with respect to public safety or residential occupant safety. If there's an exemption to not count that concrete, then we will heat it to the residents' safety and benefit. If there isn't, then we won't, and we'll just shovel it. And we're fine either way you guys want to adjudicate that. We're fine with that. I just want to be clear on that. It's also with respect to the efficiency, BGV was just, I'm really proud of the way we go about doing things. We installed weather stations for predictive monitoring at both Peak 7 and Peak 8. And we were recently awarded the regional award by the Environmental Protection Agency for our efforts at Peak 7 in particular to have our snow melt systems activate in a predictive fashion when there's snow coming, and then to turn off when it's not. And it's not a continuous loop running that's just spending energy to heat sidewalks. How many times have we seen a sprinkler in life going off when it's raining outside? That's exactly what this does. It says, don't heat the concrete if there's not snow going to fall. And we're recognized for that. And so I think that in conjunction with what happens with the code and the efficiencies, that's the kind of consideration I believe that we'll get with staff to figure out how those kind of systems play to the efficiency. The code says 5,000 square feet, but in reality, if you could do 6,000 square feet with the same amount of energy, is there a material difference? And that's the efficiency calculation that we're after, is that there be some, this is like one of the first times to fully implement this REMP in coordination with 33R and sustainability. So I think there's an opportunity to create some guidelines for staff and for future applicants and other things to say, this is a good interpretation of how we apply this policy. So back to, with respect to in the code on 33R, it's not that we don't want to take the negative points that we're due. I want to be clear on that. We're not trying to seek an exemption from that. There's a component of the code that says you can have unlimited negative points. That we can't subject ourselves to with a future council that might say, well, here's -30 and good luck building your building, because then it won't get built. We, in a good faith fashion, we need to be able to go through this process and know at the end of it that we can actually build the building. And so that's what we're after in the development agreement discussions, is some reasonable level of assurances that we're going to be able to build what we intend to build. So we're not trying to, we just want to have a stop loss on the negative points, not so that it's open-ended, right? So that 5,000 square feet, I'll take Jay's interpretation of every 5,000 square feet thereafter is only mine. No, I think REP is working great, because this has gone from 50-some thousand outdoor heated space to around 20,000 a day. I can assure you that everybody in the audience that has anything to do with build is already trying to figure out how we can have less than the 10,000 square feet, because every negative point matters, right? And so in addition to these egress pathways you see, as I look at this again from, with respect to energy use in a developer, I have to question how much of that purple, which is for the pool deck, and how much of the yellow, which is for a restaurant patio deck, how much of that needs to be heated. With respect to the negative points that will come with it, and to modulate our plan in accordance with REMP. And so we think it's working, it's having the right effect. I think the BGV was already doing many of the things that REMP calls out. And so we're happy to be a part of that. I would say that with respect to the location of the energy offsets, this building, as you can see, the long ridge line, that's running east and west. And the other buildings that we have, Grand Lodge on Peak 7 and Peak 8, those run north-south, which give you those west-facing panels. That's one of the reasons why it's terribly inefficient to have, we're not saying we wouldn't have panels on this building. It's just, there's just not enough real estate that is efficient to place the panels. And so we want to be able to locate them within the community, but on other sites is the first part of the ask. The second is, and we think that Brian Bingy, who does the energy calcs for us, we think that we have enough surface square feet amongst all our buildings to completely offset the outdoor energy used. But as a backstop, to be able to procure source that energy out of Breckenridge, with the approval of the staff in terms of that's going to be fulfilled. And then finally, that if there is a fail on our part, either through offsetting it in Breckenridge or buying something that is that works and that is going to be there to the satisfaction of the staff, then we would pay the fee in lieu. And so we think that this, we talked about this a couple of days ago, and staff and BGV are in agreement that those three options in order make sense, and we'll comply with the staff's interpretation. And to the extent that you agreed that on this map that the orange, the public egress for safety is exempt, then that would be the jurisdiction of the staff to identify which sidewalks are necessary for safety, right? And so I'm not going to tell staff. They'll say, okay, this one counts, this one doesn't, and we'll work within those confines of the staff determining if you elect to allow exemption of the heated concrete for public safety. And then Yeah, so that's when we talk about exemption in 33R, it's about public safety. We want to cap the unlimited negative points. That language is kind of, I feel like, a little too broad to give us comfort. And then the three-pronged approach on the location of the energy offsets. But we are committed to doing the right thing with the way we operate our resorts with respect to energy. We have for a long period of time. I think we have an exceptional track record. It's been recognized nationally, and even the building officials from the town came to look at our systems inside of Peak 8 to see how we can, as a community, codify those things to make them better. I think want to continue to be a leader in energy, responsible energy use in these large buildings, and set an example in Breckenridge and elsewhere. So that's
Thanks,
where we
Mike.
are.
Questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Did you consider covering the walkway?
Those walkways, we will.
So they're gonna be covered and heated?
No, we could do that. I think our preference would be not to build a structure that covers those walkways, because the snow is still going to accumulate underneath. It would offset some of it, but it's not going to be dry, 100% dry, if the concrete were heated.
Okay, and do you guys shovel currently? Do you shovel around your properties?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just I know that in Aspen, they're really trying to just use way more shoveling and way less heated sidewalks. And while I'm sympathetic to the safety aspect, I also feel like if these walkways, particularly this one on the eastern boundary, is really just for emergency, like most, rarely going to be used or not commonly going to be used. I'm just wondering if it's really, because while we want to be safe, the point is to just minimize the amount of heated space, so outdoor space. So I guess I'm just wondering if it would accomplish the same thing to just have those shoveled.
If it was a choice between -5 points and hiring people to shovel, we're buying shovels. we're still going to put them in. I mean, that path on the east side of the building is a road to nowhere. It goes down to the entrance to the resort. It's really literally there for this purpose, for safety egress. But again,
I guess that's where I'm a little bit torn, is I understand that I see that it's there for emergency egress really only, but it also seems crazy to heat a walkway that's gonna only be used in an emergency.
And that, again, that would be controlled by the snow detection system, the predictive part of it. So it wouldn't be on all the time, but I hear you. I mean, it's ultimately you turn it on and ultimately you use fuel to energy to heat that. And so look, we're fine either way. We really are. I don't have I'm fine doing it either way.
Other question? Todd, any questions?
Got one more, Eric, when Todd's done.
Nope.
Jesse, doesn't the new code require controls around moisture and temperature for these snow melt systems go on and off? I mean, isn't that already part of the code?
It does, but I think the system that they're talking about exceeds even the baseline that we're asking for.
Okay, that's great.
Todd, why don't you go first with your comments?
Yeah, I like the work and the leadership here. I think these efforts on REMP are the direction we want to go. I love the offsetting of the interior spaces, and applaud the efforts here to lead. So nice job.
Okay.
I agree. Mike, you guys have been leaders in this space for sure. I think a year or two, we talked about some of the things that are going on in Grand Colorado that I had no idea. And I'm very, I wanted to recognize you for the amazing work, because I think it's pushing the envelope. It's where the private sector is really doing great things to maybe even further the public sector. When it comes to prioritizing the renewable energy, I obviously I would put in town first, just like you have it. I don't know enough about out of county renewable energy and how that works and how sustained that is. I believe when we do pay in lieu, it is a lump sum of going, okay, this is what it's gonna cost to do this, you know, ourselves or to further it. When we're looking at out of county things, I get uneasy just because it's 100% out of my wheelhouse and I don't understand how it works and how effective it is and verifiable. So at this second, I would put that to third for me, but again, maybe with more education, I can become more comfortable with it. Waiving negative points for 33R. Again, I hate to say this, but I'm not comfortable in having a decision right now on a yes or no. I'd love to see how those points play out. Is it something that it's negative 35 points and yeah, the project's dead in the water if that's needed, or with getting, you know, to Kelly's point of shoveling or covering those sidewalks that are rarely used and minimizing the amount of spacing and for the restaurant patio and the pool decks, what does that really look like? And so I would love to see ComDev kind of come back with a point analysis on that particularly to see where that looks like when considering the positive points for hers and efficiency standards. I think that kind of addresses if I'm amenable to adjusting efficiency calculations in REMP. I think that's in that package as well. And as far as any other issues, no, I just want to say that I'm very supportive of looking at of trying to recognize within the code all the efforts that the applicant's making to bring about efficiencies as they have.
Carol.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. We appreciate BGV's commitment to their sustainability efforts and are seeing it in this plan. And also kudos to staff to helping us pass REMP as we're already seeing the significant reduction in outdoor heated. So this will be, I think, the first, if not one of the first applications of REMP. So it is incredibly important in how we set the precedent. So to start off with, you have the three-pronged approach for offset. I think that the offset with solar on independent, other BGV-owned businesses absolutely follows the intention of REMP. I think the independent analysis part that staff pointed out is incredibly important within this. The second part of offsite out of county offset, I think, again, precedent setting, we didn't write this into REMP because that's not a solution that we want to pursue. We want offset close on site or on site, and if not, it's a fee in lieu. And also what I'm hearing, it's incredibly hard to monitor, make sure that whatever existing project it would exist as long as the building exists. I think it'd be a burden on staff to review. And it's something I don't think we would be open to if a single family homeowner wanted to do this. So I'm not in favor of that. Let's see, 33R, the negative points, again, precedent setting. So I agree with Jay where to waive this. Well, I applaud the indoor offset, and I think that could be a reason if we codify it to be a little more lenient on the negative points. But also I'm not in favor of waiving those points unless staff come back with those ambitious additional organic commitments to sustainability that are bulleted out. If those can be codified and could be within the development agreement and point to a reason to waive 33R, I would be amenable to that. Finally, with the egress pathways, I'd look to staff to see what is needed for safety and what should truly be exempt. And again, this will be precedent setting.
Dick?
Yeah, I also applaud the efforts and historic efforts in energy sustainability. The three-prong, the mitigation, I'm very much in favor of installing solar on all of your buildings, you know, Grand Timber, even Gold Point, you still have that?
I don't know if those roofs will handle it.
But all of your buildings, here in town, I'm also open to expanding it to the Upper Blue Basin. With Carol, I'm not comfortable going beyond that. I think the burden is too much, for accountability for the staff. I just think it's out of our control at that point. I think you know, the Upper Blue Basin's a tighter geographic area that I think we could more easily manage. I'd also like to have a timeline on that, to have the energy being generated by a certain amount of time. And if we can't get that accomplished by a deadline, then the fee in lieu kicks in. And again, I'll defer to staff to help with that one. This is a big project, you know, and I think 33R is, you know, it really is a project killer, you know, with as it's written. So I'm open to taking a look at them. I want to keep the intent of 33R, which was to motivate, and it's already worked, and I appreciate that, but to motivate the developer to minimize. So the number I'd like to move is the exempt number. And I'm not sure where that gets moved. So that 5,000 square feet that is exempt initially, I'd like to encourage staff to take a hard look at that. And, you know, does that go to you know, 7,500, or does it go higher? And something that's workable, and then leave in the 1 point per 500 beyond that, because that keeps the intent of 33R in place, which is to, you know, what we don't want to have happen is go, well, we already hit that cap, so let's just heat everything. You know, it doesn't matter. It's all waived now. And I want to, and not that you guys would do that, but this again is precedent setting. So I think we need to really keep that in mind. So I would like to take the approach of asking staff to work with the applicant and understand what's an appropriate exempt number, which is currently 5,000, but I'm open to growing it due to the scale of this project, and then leaving the 1 point per 500 in place as a motivator to not go further. So far as the egress, the emergency pathways, I'd like to look to our, I don't know if that's building or ComDev, but have the professionals on staff look at that and determine what is necessary for emergency egress. And then secondly, I'd like to have them, kind of to Kelly's point, take a look at, you know, what's going to be used, you know, on a regular basis. If it's going to be used on a regular basis, it probably makes sense to heat it. But, you know, that one, you know, thing, you know, one little spur at the east end is certainly not going to get used much. So I'm with Kelly. I'd like to see us shovel that one. But the others, I'm open to have staff identify some emergency egress that could be exempt. Let me just make sure I said everything. Yeah, and the high efficiency stuff, again, I have to go to staff. I like that it, you know, we have a process with the engineers coming in. So far as the business practices that I think are good business practices, how do we incent the developer or reward the developer for good business practices? I kind of similar to Carol, I think you said it. I mean, I look to staff to do something that we know will be back to us at some point later in a redevelopment project or another big project with some kind of justification, and where it can be codified, and because it's precedent. So I'm open to the concept of it. I'd like it to not be around waiving negative. I'd like it to be around earning positive. So if it could be quantified and measured in some way, that would be my preference. So I guess we're seeing 33R and REMP evolve as we go. So I think those are my thoughts. But thanks to the applicant for all the efforts in the past and on this project.
Kelly?
I agree really with everything that's been said, so I'll just add a couple of things. One is, in regards to the mitigation, as far as not going out of the county. If we did like first and foremost on BGB buildings and then second fee and lieu, could we use that money to put solar on employee housing, like block 11 employee housing?
The shorter answer is yes. Where BGV loses is that if they were to go to an offsite, they would receive the economic benefit of that being applied to their own meters. Whereas if they're paying the fee in lieu, they miss they miss any on-bill credits or tax credits for doing it for themselves. So that fee in lieu would be reinvested into local community projects. But the reason that they're pushing the other direction is, one, they're going to need it to be able to do their building portion. But two, there's also an economic benefit to on-bill credits that they would receive. So.
Okay, I don't know if there's a positive point process. I mean, maybe there's no number of positive points that would make it worth it. I don't know that, but I would love to see, I mean, that would really, be the quintessential win for us, would be that we'd also pass on not just the environmental, but then also the financial to our employees in town. I think that'd be really cool. So I don't know if that has any way of happening, but I'd love to see it. And then I'll just apologize to staff because I'm pretty sure the 33R conundrum with the maximum size was me. So first and foremost, sorry. But I do think it's super important that, because we're now seeing this try to get put into action, and I think rather than granting some sort of variance, I think we really need to look at, is it working? Is it going to work in the future, or do we actually need to change what's in 33R? So thank you in advance for whatever work you do on that to get that through. And then with the public safety, I think something that Dick said about utilization, I would love to be able to understand, because I do think, like, when we encourage people not to heat, we sort of also want to say, like, it's not that you can't be snow free. It's just that you need to shovel. And so I do feel like that's maybe part of the conversation that we need to have with applicants, is like, if this is really not ever going to be utilized, like, we're not going to waive it because we really think in this case you should be shoveling. So that's just something to think about in the future. But thank you. Oh.
So there are a lot of times that we change the code. You know exactly what we're doing, because there are things that we're professionals at the community, and we've done things for a long time. When we change historic guidelines, whatever we do, we have an expertise that we do it and we know that it works, and we don't fluctuate from what we do because that's what we want. I see REMP totally differently. I think this is a completely moving target. Probably easier from a standpoint of a single family home, but a large development like this, I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn what truly works, not what we think is important, not what we think will work, because I do feel that REMP is still, I wouldn't say half-baked, but only partially baked. And I think there's opportunities to have this development lead the next part of REMP, the next codified part of REMP. And some of the things that they're doing, I think, are important to push forward. For instance, their weather stations, I think, are way more important than some of the stuff that we have written in REMP. And for larger developments, I would rather see that. So I would rely almost 100% on your opinion of what they do in this whole thing. I really, if you think that the points should be waived because there's things they're doing that are like the inside offset that we haven't even talked about. If what's the overall goal? The overall goal is to use less energy for all these people that are going to be here. That's the goal. And to nickel and dime, sort of our way through it, I don't want to do that. I want you to tell us which of these things truly work. What's the important piece? If offsite somewhere else, I mean, we have talked about this as a council, is buying energy somewhere else. Well, if that in the end moves the needle, I'm okay with that. There's only two parts of this that I can really look at and say, I want to take a deeper look. That the egress part is pretty important, and it looks like there's a ton of stairs. So I don't know if you can cover the stairs and shovel the rest, or, you know, I'd rather not see you cover the whole thing. I mean, people are going to want to step, even though they can get inside, people are still going to step out there because, you know, there's nature and they're from non-nature places. So people will still want to walk around the building. So people will still be using these. And then the one place I think where the heating is excessive is the restaurant. I think there are plenty of days during the winter, there's plenty of days, if it snows or not, that doesn't need to be heated because nobody's going to be sitting out there. So January, February, or December through February, that heat shouldn't be on, period, because it's too freaking cold to sit out there and eat. And maybe one guy's going to sit out there because he thinks it's great. But I think there's some opportunity in there to affect some of the heating that I think is unnecessary. Now, the pool area, I totally get. That's part of the amenity deal. Your guests are paying for that. So you need to figure out a way to mitigate that point. But other than those two things, I leave this on staff to come back and say, look, this is the stuff he needs to pay for. This is the stuff that we want to codify. This is the stuff we're okay just giving them a waiver on. So that's where I am. All right. What do you have? One more piece to discuss here?
Yes. Thanks, Jesse.
Jesse, thank you very much for the help. And Mike, by the way, I got that thing from Bennett's office about the EPA award. That's pretty awesome for this community that Big Bad Mike Dudek's.
Thank you.
Sam Dudek's in charge of shoveling for the resort.
Yeah, he is. Well, it depends on which one's in my favor. I have 4 crew.
All right, so the final topic for today is extended vesting. And obviously this is a multifaceted development agreement here with 6 unique parcels and phasing of a lot of things that have to happen before other components, with building 4 being one of the last, or parcel 4 being one of the last ones that could be developed, because they have to develop their housing, their parking, roundabout improvements. And so with that, Mike has proposed that, and I should note also that the current Peak 7 and 8 master plan that would be governing this is expiring in just over 2 years, in November 2025. It's amazing that was extended for 20 years, and we're actually it's almost time that it's expiring. So he's asking for 7 years extended vesting of that particular master plan, because that'll have to go through an amendment, which will take time to codify all these changes and asks that would be detailed in the development agreement. The gondola lots master plan will also need to be modified to reflect what we're desiring out of this development agreement, which also takes time. That will have more components that will be done in the near future. So he's only requesting 5 years on that one, assuming that they go quicker. So, you know, we have a history of extended vesting, but it's always commensurate with the community benefit. So we're asking if those seem like reasonable timelines for extending.
Thanks, Chris. Questions? Other than, I'm assuming the question is, does the council support the extended vesting request rather than does the applicant? Because
oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure I know that answer.
My question is, what's the gondola lots master plan?
So the gondola lots master plan is what was approved that allowed their previous development application they kind of be in sync. In order to transfer the density that's needed for the building, for this building and other, in the single family lots, we're gonna have to strip a lot of that density off to move it up there. We're gonna have to basically down zone the density on the gondola lots to only, instead of having the, forget how much density, but the 143 to be reflective of what agreement is asking. So we wouldn't want to transfer density up to peak 7 and 8 and still leave 143 SFEs that could be used anywhere. We want to be very prescriptive and deliberate with on both of the master plans of what we want based on this development agreement.
So are there any unintended consequences? Like, are there any things that don't have anything to do with Dudick and this project and BGV that are included in that we would be extending that we haven't considered? Or
Basically the danger of extending vesting. Like a good example is if we would have extended the vesting in the previous, I'll use that as an example, the gondola lots master plan. That only had 3 years vesting. Right after we approved that master plan, we had a lot of code changes, with rent being one, density and mass being probably the biggie, where that one specified density and mass in it. So if that were extended for 20 years, someone else could have come along and built something long after we wanted less intensity on that site. So it really precludes the opportunity, if you have code changes that you want to make and think are important, then those aren't relevant if it's specified in the master plan. Not all policies are identified in the master plan, but if you have something 20 years, just think of all the code changes that have happened since the original, amendment to the peak 7 and 8 master plan 20 years ago. So that's the reason why you don't want to give such a long fuse. But I think that from a staff perspective, understanding all the steps that are needed to continue on this path, that you're negotiating in good faith, that 5 to 7 years actually does seem fairly reasonable, if not ambitious, to get everything accomplished.
Vic?
Chris, help me understand, because I'm a little confused on the gondola lot piece, that 5 year, right? There's how long left now on that current master plan?
Well, the current one,
Hold now for 6 months, right? Or whatever's left of that 6 months.
yeah, we have multiple development agreements, but just to kind of bring it back, there was the timeline. It was the 3 years. They didn't ask for extended vesting. They just did that per code. There was no development agreement associated with the original development. Once that expires, then the provisions that don't align with the code, the biggie being that mass is identified in that master plan, would expire, and then they would have to come back and have a master plan that complies with the code. Really, right now, if you approve a development agreement and you want them to build the way that the development agreement is intended, you're going to need 2 master plan modifications. They basically say that the north gondola lot is now the land use is parking. It's not multifamily buildings. It's not townhomes. That the site on parcel 2 is employee housing and parking. Parcel 3 would be consistent with the existing master plan, but we want those to be changed. And so with that, you would normally only get 3 years. So if Mike has to build a parking structure, employee housing, and a roundabout that's associated with the gondola lots master plan before you can get any COs and any kind of market rate development, by the time he gets to parcel 4, which we're guessing is probably the last component of the master plan, that's probably not going to happen in 3 years. Like that's just probably too much going on, really, for the most ambitious
Doesn't
developer.
the master plan require that a substantial start happen, not a CO? I thought the master plan, as long as they have a substantial start, then they've satisfied the master plan,
They,
correct?
yes, you're correct in that regard. If you get a site-specific development permit, then you have to achieve substantial
Construction.
substantial construction, but I mean, you could look at the previous approval just for one site for something that didn't have all the other public improvements. It didn't have a parking structure. It didn't have a roundabout. You know, just having COVID thrown in the mix to take 1 year off of that. And then where they, you know, it takes a lot to get engineered drawings and everything. They basically were not able to build because there was no way they could hit that substantial construction just for that one site in the 3 years by having really like a year delay
Yeah.
from the other one. So
But they sold it in the meantime, and that's I mean, things change and, you know, that's my concern of having these run out too far. I'm okay with peak 7, peak 8, you know, 7 seems a little excessive, but I'm not gonna battle on that one. I'm really worried about the gondola lot going out 5 years plus whatever's left on it. Now I'm not sure what's left. I think that's.
But it would be 5 years that said parking on North Gondola, parking and
So we'll change
affordable
that
housing.
immediately.
Well, that's the stuff that'll change. That's the master plan that's being considered is 5 years on the new master
Okay.
plan, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to understand. That's what I'm
and
trying to understand.
trying to make it clear is they need to do 2 master plan modifications. They
As
come,
long as
they come in the conformance with what you're desiring here. We're not
Do sell it, it's still
grandfathering.
parking, it's still housing.
Yeah, and
So-
that's precisely what I'm trying to understand. As long as it's not 5 years on the existing master plan, we'll modify the existing master plan to reflect kind of what we've been talking about here for the last several meetings and, okay.
And
That-
then
that helps.
just to clarify one of Dick's points, so when and if this agreement is signed, then that voids the previous gondola master plan. This would override it.
Yes.
So the project, okay.
The development agreement will?
No, the master plan will. It has to be a master plan. It can't be a development.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'll walk out the roadmap a little bit. So we're in the development agreement phase, which is really saying, you know, the deal points that the 2 parties are coming together. From that, the next step would be modifying both of those master plans to make them reflect what was agreed upon within the development agreement, assign all the density to the correct parcels, have any waivers, or any kind of code provisions, but just really have that prescription. The next step would be to go to site-specific development review, which each component of this would get. There's some cases, because if it's in a singular master plan area, Mike could choose to go and say, I want to develop parcel 2. I want to do the improvements on parcel 1 for drainage. I want to build the roundabout, and I also want approval of these duplexes. He could ask for everything under one, or he may say, I'm only doing one at a time, and then shift up to peak 7 and 8. He might say, I'm only to do the subdivision for the lots, and I'm going to wait 3 years before I even want to start, you know, designing for the building on parcel 4.
So would it be 5 and 7 plus 3, or would it just be 5 and 7?
It's 5, a 5 restatement on the gondola, because we're restating a lot of terms and conditions and density issues there. And then it's plus 7 on the peak 7 and peak 8 expiration date. And the reason why they're staggered is that, or the reason why they're different numbers, different length, is that we're bound to do the improvements on the gondola before or have reasonable proof that financial penalties with Vail if we don't do that first. Then we move on to parcels 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
So get this first one done and then move up the hill.
And-
So
And usually at the master plan level, we'll have them include a phasing plan that's supposed, I mean, I think we know what's kind of needed, but we'd ask for that to be spelled out. But I think Dick's question was, is it 7 plus the 3, or is it just 7 years from the date of approval that you're asking?
we're asking for peak 7 and peak 8, the expiration date to be extended 7 years.
Right.
So that makes that 9.
Yeah.
And for downtown, 5 years from the effective date of execution of this agreement.
Mhm.
So
5 and 9.
Yeah, 5 and 9.
if you want total length, 5 and 9.
Everybody okay with that?
What's the perimeter of the gondola lots master plan? Does that encroach into like the postal lot or anywhere in City Market, or is
It does, it does not. It's essentially the three areas or the really two areas. It's just the North Gondola lot, that entirety, and what was or the Gold Rush lots, the two Gold Rush
In its
lots
entirety.
in its entirety.
The three.
Yep.
What we've been
He's
talking.
been numbering it, the way he's been numbering it. Yeah. Todd, any comments or questions?
It's a complicated deal. I wonder if he needs more time. No, I'm good with the timelines here. It, yeah, it makes sense.
Need any money too while you're at it? Thanks, Todd.
I'm supportive.
Carol, Dick,
I'm supportive.
Kelly.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Is that it for the day?
Thank you.
That we'll have we'll try and get through as many issues on the 24th as possible. And we'll maybe even, depending on where we're at, we may go into just having a draft development agreement we can pick apart before we get to the readings.
Very good. Thanks, everyone, for showing up. Any other matters today?
Actually, there were a couple miscellaneous that we didn't talk about. We can do it later if you want. The BOEC positive points. And I guess that was the other one. We can talk about it later if you want, but I didn't know if that was something we were supposed to talk about today or not.
I think that there, for my seat, there's plenty of stuff to circle back on the parcel 4, so I'm happy to wait to address that.
Okay,
until
just
point
write
in
that
time.
down so we know
I
to
mean,
get to
I
it.
know.
Okay. Anything else?
Extra meeting for you guys.
I just want to say one thing, not about you. As you know, Jody Church is moving on. And, I just want to say she was a great, great leader of the ski resort from a town aspect. We had a good relationship, got a lot of stuff done. She was very open to things like when Kelly bullied her on housing and I bullied her on snow staying. And she was great, but there were some things I think that she did that will go unheralded by the community. And among them is the way that she redesigned the way people move around the mountain. And, there's a lot of splashy stuff with new lifts, but some of the things that she instituted up there, I think are really big deals that nobody will ever give her credit for. And I just want to wish her luck. So there you go. And hopefully they'll give us somebody good.